Okay, making sure we got audio, we got image. Looks like the stream is live. All right. So, welcome to the stream today, guys. Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I am not going to be driving for now. I'm going to do a driving stream after this, but for now, what I'm planning on doing is I'm going to go through and review kind of tier list every single book that I read in 2025. And I think there was 48. I think it was 48 books that I read in 2025. I know there are some like purists out there who are like, "Oh, audiobooks don't count." Go and fuck yourself. Audiobooks do count. Um, Around at least half of these are ones that I experienced as an audiobook, and that is because I have a full-time job. And when I'm not at that job, I'm driving, I'm working on videos, I'm working on design projects, I'm watching movies, TV, studying Japanese. I'm going on road trips, going on hikes, getting to the tops of mountains, seeing amazing places around the United States. So, because of that, experiencing these books is something that I often do on my commute or on my road trips. Because when I go on a road trip, like I think my longest one, well, the longest one for the shortest amount of days was like 42 hours of driving, and that was going to Dallas, Texas, and back to meet a friend. Um, I did like ones that were like 10-day road trips though, where I like did giant loops trying to find high points and really saw and experienced amazing things. So some of these books are actually connected to specific memories. And let's get into the review. Let's start reviewing them. We'll start with one that makes me think of now the Grand Canyon. When I was in Arizona, I was reading Stephen King's Salem's Lot. Uh, I listened to a couple interviews about this one, and it seemed like when he was writing this one, he wanted to create sort of a book where you know the vampires, the bad guys, kind of win. But then he said when he's writing, he writes kind of intuitively, so he's just sort of going with the flow, and he's like, I don't know what the characters are gonna do. Um, it has been interesting. I've been listening to more interviews from authors, and it is kind of interesting to hear the different methods and perspectives they have about writing. And for him, he said that in this one, he wanted to make the bad guys win, the vampires have a win. But then he said they didn't completely win because he started to love the characters and their strengths so much. I did not feel that way. I felt like the vampires still won. This was a deeply depressing book. I love the teacher character, and that's probably part of why is because like the teacher character who plays like hard rock and like tries to inject a lot of personality in his class. Obviously, that was a character who I kind of related to, and so his fate. I was like, oh, that made me sad. Um, because of that, when I finished it, there was some enjoyable parts, but for the most part, it didn't feel as satisfying as a lot of the other vampire fiction I've read. So I think Salem's Law is just going to be kind of a middle of the road C tier. So sorry, Mr. King. Salem's Law is going in C tier. Um, let's see what else have we got. Um, this is one that was interesting for me to read. I read Fight Club by frick, I always forget how he says his name. I'm so sorry. Chuck Palahniuk, I guess. I can't remember. I literally watched an interview where he told the guy how he wanted his name to be pronounced. He seems like an interesting guy. Maybe a little bit of an edgelord, which I mean, for the book that he wrote, it kind of makes sense. But when I watched the movie when I was younger, I think I watched it for like free in middle school on YouTube. I saw like the thumbnail, and it's Brad Pitt just ripped as the thumbnail, and it was Fight Club full movie. And at that time I was like really interested because my family had just gotten the internet, and I was starting to see. I mean, looking back, a lot of it was kind of bullshit. Aikido and Krav Maga, and just seeing those things and like being captivated by them. Oh, it's so amazing. And so then I started finding, jujitsu and actual like highlights of and clips. And back then in the old YouTube Wild West days, sometimes you could find, full fights. So I was watching like UFC fights and stuff on YouTube. And so when I saw this movie, like I watched this and Fight Club and Never Back Down entirety like on YouTube. The copyright back then was not the way it is now. So I watched both of those movies on YouTube, and I became like crazy about Fight Club when I watched it. And Tyler Durden was like this very like captivating and like interesting character to me, even like using Microsoft Paint, because back then I thought like quotes were really interesting. I was back then I had planned to eventually, as I went from middle school to high school, I wanted to do debate, because I kind of felt like if I was able to find success in that, that would be one of the avenues in which I might be able to get into a better university or get scholarships, because I knew my parents weren't going to be able to pay for my college. So I took debate and like in middle school academic team really seriously. So I was really into like quotes, and so I made like quote posters. It's embarrassing, but quote posters in Microsoft Paint for Fight Club. And I thought Tyler Durden was like really cool and interesting. And obviously Brad Pitt looks sick in this movie. It's like a lot of people's fitness goals. Like for a while, it was my fitness goal. Um, I got really lean when I was in Italy, and so I took a picture kind of like posing the way he did, because I was like, oh yeah, like I'm getting close. But going back and watching it and reading it now, I'm actually really grateful that I misinterpreted it, because um definitely there's a lot of satire and like concern. Like there a lot of the things he does say, and like the irony of him working well, I can't remember what it's like, incident mitigation or something. Like the primary character works, his job is basically this horrible office job where he kind of does recalls, and he essentially, their decision to do a recall has nothing to do with the health or well-being of people or the customers. It has entirely to do with the amount of money the company, the business stands to lose. And so basically they're looking at how much money they would lose in lawsuits versus doing the recall. And so he's just got this miserable job, and his interactions with the boss, and just those kind of things. It makes sense, because yeah, that aspect of society and life really sucks. And so Tyler Durden is like this really attractive, this idea of rebellion is like really cool. But then towards the later part of the book, this is the kind of stuff that I missed when I was younger, is just how dangerous the kind of reaction to these crappy things about life are. How like being a lot of the like cult of personality, and the people who are like overly macho or rebellious can also be kind of cultish or dangerous and manipulative. And yeah, Tyler Durden, towards the end of the book, you're like, oh, he's kind of a monster, and he also just sucks. He sucks. And I think it's like huge now. Like I wish more people would read the book and kind of think on it, because of like the kind of manosphere creators and stuff that kind of boomed and exploded really, like especially during COVID. Like that stuff, like I didn't even want it, but it was just flooding my feed. Just Jordan Peterson, who is the dude who went to jail and was tried for like the trafficking charges. I can't even remember. It's not Alex Jones. Alex Jones is the nuts guy, who happened to be right quite a few times. He's got like the brother. Man, I can't even remember his name. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen him, which is good. But yeah, the algorithm for some reason was just like, you want this. And there was a few other guys who were, kind of, they had like a military spin on it or a fitness spin on it. But the kind of like macho, like manosphere stuff, I feel like definitely kind of tied into this whole Tyler Durden thing. Because Tyler Durden, yeah, he's like super rebellious, and he makes you feel like the part of the movie and the book where they take the guy who's like working at a crap job, and they kind of like put a gun to his head, and they're like, what did you want to do when you grew up? And he's like, well, I think he says he wants to be a veterinarian or something. And Tyler Durden's like, he's like, if you don't like make progress towards becoming a veterinarian in like the next year, I'm gonna keep checking on you, and if you don't, I'm gonna kill you. And so now he's like, oh, that guy's gonna like try really hard, maybe. And so that idea of like pushing yourself to like follow goals is like kind of attractive. But then also like Tyler Durden starts like building an army, and he's like basically got people like being super submissive to him and doing exactly the same thing that kind of corporate America does. Which is exactly these manosphere guys. They're like, you need to be tough. Don't like anyone tell you to do. Don't let anyone mess with your finances. I'm gonna teach you how to be a man, but you to be a man have to do everything I say. And you gotta buy this $1,200 course. You gotta get this $50 a month subscription. So I think it has a lot of great themes in Fight Club. And I think a lot of it that some people say is like dick lit or is just it's actually satire, because I feel like towards the end of the book, even more obvious than in the movie. Like I feel like in the movie, like they kind of romanticize it a little bit at the end with the city exploding, but the ending of Fight Club, the book, is different. Spoiler warning, if you're gonna read Fight Club. I think Tyler Durden, now I can't remember. One of them ends up in prison. I think it's Tyler, but because he's so well connected, he's basically like, oh, I'm gonna get out and I'm not gonna leave you alone. I guess they're essentially the same person. It's a split personality. Again, spoilers. But it's an old book and it's an old movie. You've probably seen it. But yeah, basically the end of the book is ominous. It's ominous. It's not kind of this like celebratory, like, the Pixies, where is my mind kind of. It was like, oh, this sucks. This is scary. So I actually really liked Fight Club. I'm gonna slap Fight Club in A. We'll see. Some of these might move around, might be a little flexible as we get more on here and we compare. But yeah, that's gonna be that. Another one, because a big part of why I was inspired to read and why I started reading so much more. I started reading more again because I hadn't really read as much. I read a few books after, college and high school, but I wasn't reading as frequently. A big reason I got much more into it, I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I like came from suburban Utah or because like my dad is Italian, so I grew up kind of with someone like in a primary role in my life who spoke English as a second language. But when I'm around people, sometimes I hate when I notice it. I'll start to like copy their accent or the way they speak. Maybe everyone does this, but I feel like I do it a lot, and it kind of sucks sometimes. But I was teaching English in Korea, and for especially the first 6 months, I didn't really have a lot of friends, and I wasn't meeting people who I had, a lot of English conversations with for the first 6 months. Like I was, like basically all of the conversation I had was with Koreans and Korean children who were learning English. And I started noticing that like I started thinking in like ESL. Like I was doing a lot of the speaking mannerisms that they would do. And I was like, okay, I can't do this. I need to hear like some proper English like in the background, like more consistently in my mind. So I started reading books and listening to audiobooks, especially when I was going on long trips to the mountains, and I was like, oh, I really enjoy this. Like, I don't know why I ever stopped. And around that time, I saw like a PewDiePie video where he was talking about the books that he read. And one of them that he mentioned, I guess he became like a huge Yukio Mishima kind of fan, which is kind of interesting choice. Yukio Mishima is like a really nationalistic kind of guy, but he's also kind of conflicted. It was really interesting reading this book. Osamu Dazai. I think him and Osamu Dazai maybe met at one point and they like hated each other, or maybe I'm thinking of someone else, but like you can definitely see that they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. I think why I think it's these two, and why I thought it was funny is because people think that both of them might be gay, which reading Sun and Steel by this author definitely made me realize and like understand why people think he might be a closeted gay. Like as I was reading it, I was kind of like, yeah, I can see it. Like him talking about like the beauty of men and like doing sports when he was younger and like admiring the other guys, and I don't know, like some points I was like, yeah, you know what, maybe I could kind of see it. But a lot of the ideas in Sun and Steel were kind of cool. Um, a lot of it has to do with kind of like believing his personal philosophy that kind of strength in the mind and kind of soul, this kind of maybe metaphysical strength and power is just as important as the body, and how they're both kind of inherently connected. Which, yeah, I think is, yeah, that makes sense. Pretty true. Um, there's a lot of parts where he talked about his past, some like struggles. It was like pretty interesting, but it wasn't that entertaining or enjoyable for me personally. Sometimes I get like little nuggets or things where I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But especially kind of like after, I mean, I've kind of losing faith and just, I'm at a point, and also things with the manosphere and just everyone trying to sell you a course. You've got these people who you find out are scammers, just people doing like MLMs who are like, let me tell you how to live, pay me to tell you how to live, pay me to tell you how to succeed. And them just being kind of like awful, kind of scuzzy people. So a lot of media where the media is like, let me tell you how to live, I feel like I kind of have an aversion for. It was interesting. There were some poetic moments, but for me, it was like not that enjoyable, entertaining. It didn't impress me as much as it definitely impressed PewDiePie. Um, but PewDiePie obviously was like at that point, he was like kind of going through a very introspective phase where he's trying to figure out who he wants to be, like him kind of getting married, starting to probably get ready to have kids that he now has, and him trying to like deal with his own like materialism and the fact that he's like ultra wealthy, but also he was like kind of hated for a while because of what he said on the bridge. But yeah, for me, this one was like not, it didn't, Sun and Steel by Mishima did not blow me away. I was like, oh, all right, that's kind of cool. Like a little artifact of a guy who had a very interesting life, and was an interesting person, but not someone who I want to be. Um, Next up, let's talk about The Helm of Midnight. This was an enjoyable enough book. Unfortunately, it did that kind of thing where it like skips between a few different stories. Sometimes I feel like that works really well. In this one, I feel like it was okay. It was serviceable. It wasn't as bad as like a lot of other things. Like I feel like in The Last of Us, that's what really kills it for me. Like I just feel like the momentum just bam crashes to a halt, and I feel like it detracts from. I can see why they did it, and I see what they were trying to say with The Last of Us 2, but it's still not my favorite format or kind of vehicle of a story. Helm of Midnight definitely bounces around. Um, I read this book because it was on a list where it was like books that kind of have themes or atmosphere that's kind of comparable to Dark Souls or Elden Ring, and it was all right. It was all right. I really loved the mask magic system. Kind of their story was interesting, but the momentum and also the finale didn't really hit me as hard as I wanted it to. A lot of the mysteries and the reveals of the mysteries, like the history of the serial killer kind of mask character, because basically in this book, you can trap people's spirit inside of a mask. And the masks, depending on the strength of the spirit, have like a power level or something. And some people can like wear the mask. And when you wear the mask, you can be influenced by that person's spirit, which means if they have like some sort of knowledge, like specifically the girl wants like herbal and medical knowledge from a specific mask to help her mother who has an illness. So you can use the mask to kind of use their knowledge vicariously. But that also means you can trap like evil spirits. And also if a spirit is like of a certain strength and you can't handle it, they can kind of take over your body. So that part of the book was interesting, but the story itself, like the world was interesting, but the story itself I didn't feel like was that impressive. I'm going to put this one in B for now. If we get a lot of Bs that I feel like were better, I might drop it down to C. But The Helm of Midnight, it was all right. It was all right. It was one where I wanted to continue. I was like, oh, I hope, oh, I wonder what this is. But at the end of it, I wasn't like, wow, this is great. So that was too bad. Another one we're going to do, let's do The Year of the Flood. This book is now forever connected in my mind to Yellowstone and kind of the Sawtooth Mountains. I listened to this book while driving through Yellowstone and heading, I think, into Idaho because I was planning on summiting Mount Bora, which was a crazy experience. Oh man, that's a crazy one to do. Did it in a day, and also there's a portion of Mount Bora. It's the highest peak, I think, in Idaho. It's in the Sawtooth Mountains, which are gorgeous. If you ever have a chance to go down there, at some point I've got to talk about the motel I stayed at because it was honestly awesome. It was clean. The owner was super nice and encouraging about going to the mountain. It was a little rough getting food on the weekend because like everything closed. So there's one day where I just like only ate snacks, and then luckily the gas station opened for a bit, so I was able to get in there and get gas station snacks. But like, there's only like two restaurants in the town at the foot of the mountain, so like. There's like Saturday and Sunday where I was recovering, waiting to go on to Mount Bora, where I was just like, oh no, I can't get real food. So I was just living off of like gummy snacks and granola bars and jerky for 2 days, waiting for these restaurants to open. But the breakfast place there was delicious. But yeah, Mount Bora, Chicken Out Ridge. It's one of those like kind of scrambles on the rocks where like if you fall, you die, and it's close to the top. And right after that, there's like Scree. On the way back, on Chicken Out Ridge, it started to rain, and like all the rock got slippery, and I was like, oh, this is a nightmare. And I get vertigo, so it was wild. But I made it down. It was beautiful, just otherworldly views. Mount Bora was awesome. But now, this is the book I listened to during this portion of my road trip. So now, The Year of the Flood by Margaret Atwood is forever connected in my mind to Mount Bora. Um, I read this book because I read Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, which really impressed me because the book, I feel like, I when I read it, I didn't really pay attention to who the author was. I was just like, it was a portion of time where I was just like trying to read books on a list. Um, and later I saw it was Margaret Atwood, and I was shocked. I was like, oh, she's like the one who did like I think The Handmaid's Tale, and she is a woman, because I feel like the book very effectively captures the kind of darkness in young men and like some of like the nefariousness and problems that you kind of go through as you're going through like puberty, without being like so heavy-handed like Judy Blume does. It's definitely a sci-fi book, and it also kind of parallels some of the things to like cults and like the ultra rich trying to like create things to like fix society that are kind of like unethical. um but this book was not about that. This book was um kind of about cults and religion. um Basically, this I thought this was going to be a sequel, but it's kind of, I don't know, it's not exactly a prequel. It's a parallel story that happens around the same time as Oryx and Crake, because it starts just before the catastrophe and then continues a little bit after. I was hoping for a sequel because I was like, oh, I can't wait to find out what happens after Oryx and Crake, but no, it's just like a different group of people, and also like very different themes. Um, there was definitely a lot of interesting things about kind of religion, and now the character that they focus on is a woman mostly, a couple of women, just how like one of them kind of, her life is very difficult. She's kind of pressured into kind of selling herself, and how she's treated, and then how she finds kind of solace after being abused in this kind of it's like a small cult, and they're doomsdayers. They're kind of doomsdayers, which a lot of kind of more culty religions are. But then these kind of culty people, because they prepare for this, it's part of what allows them to survive through the kind of cataclysm that does come from the Oryx and Crake book. Um, and there's also like these kind of evangelical songs in between, which I thought were kind of funny because I was like, ah, they're kind of familiar. But the ending was kind of strange. Like, it felt like the book introduced all these themes and they had a lot of interesting things about this kind of culty group, but I don't feel like most of them really went anywhere. And then just the cataclysm happens, and then it kind of turns into like a weird adventure, where they're trying to like save a couple people, save their friends. So this one I really didn't like that much. I'd be tempted to put this one even in D. Like this one could be like a C or a D for me, because this one it really felt like it wasted my time. We'll put it in C for now. Maybe I'll drop it down. But yeah, I was disappointed. I was very disappointed in this one. Let's see what else we've got. We'll do Tokyo Ueno Station. We can do this one really quick. This one is kind of a very extremely depressing book. Kind of touches on this idea that like, you might be closer to homelessness than you think. All it takes is like 3 really bad things to happen, and then here, I'll move this over here so you can kind of see the cover. All it takes is like a few bad things to happen simultaneously, and you could end up being on the street if you don't have like support in place to take you. You lose your job, someone close to you dies, and you don't have a chance to recover or stabilize, so you just don't have the energy or fortitude to like continue. Extremely depressing book. Very short, but it was sad. I can see the message, but I did not enjoy it at all. So I'm putting, it's not bad, but it's just, I would never want to read this again. Probably wouldn't even really recommend it unless, I don't know, I was like, it's a Japanese book, so unless I was like speaking with a Japanese person who was like, oh, I hate homeless people, like, maybe you should read this book, get a little perspective. But at the same time, with those kinds of people, that's the problem with some of these kinds of books that are fiction. I don't know if someone who's like, God, I hate all homeless people, like, I think we should just euthanize them all. If you're like, oh yeah, read this book, it's allegorical of like real things that happen, but it is a fictional story, and also I don't know it would make a difference to people like that. I don't know if it would affect them. Who knows? Maybe it does, but I don't know if it's actually effective in that. Next one we'll talk about is Blaze Me a Sun. This one definitely makes me think of southern Utah and some of the fields and rolling hills of western Colorado, because that's when I was listening to Blaze Me a Sun by Christopher Carlson. One sec. I'm actually going to look up. Where is it? Sweden? Blaze Me a Sun. Swedish. Yeah, it is Sweden. This one was really interesting. It's kind of like a noir cop story, not like pulpy noir. It's just kind of dark and brooding, but it definitely feels like based in reality. It feels kind of more like a grounded story. And it's also cool how the rural Swedish culture and kind of setting, the backdrop plays into this kind of detective story. Basically, I think there's definitely one murder. I think there might be one more, but there's one murder, and it's interesting because basically the cop, the police officer, happens upon the murdered woman inside the back of a car, and it's like super cold. Obviously, he's like, oh gosh, we need to like get this girl to help, get her to a hospital. Her heartbeat is like faint. So he like moves her. I think he moves her to his car or something like that. He moves her, and he drives as fast as he can to a hospital, but she dies. And so he becomes obsessed with this case because he actually gets tried, I think, by the family or something, who are like, well, we don't have a criminal that's been found. We don't have the actual killer, because she was also, abused and assaulted. So they're like, we can't find the actual abuser, the assailant, to try. So they're like, we need somebody. So the family, I think, tries the police officer for moving her. They're like, oh, you're responsible for her death. Maybe if you hadn't moved her, she wouldn't have died. So because of that, the guy, the police officer who found her, is racked with guilt, and he becomes obsessed with solving this case. It kind of destroys his life. And his son, despite his wishes, also becomes a police officer. And the story kind of transitions into the son getting some information that starts to unravel and unveil things about the case. There's also some mistakes that are made that are like really bad mistakes. This was kind of a twisted, very interesting detective story. It's not my favorite book, but I definitely say it's worth a read. Like, especially if you love detective fiction. Blaze Me a Sun by Carlson was pretty cool. It was an interesting book. For now, if A gets too saturated, maybe I'll bump it down to B. But for now, I'm gonna say Blaze Me a Sun would be a pretty good A. That's a good A tier book. Let's see. Hard Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. Let's do. I had a goal. I was like, I'm gonna try and read all of the Haruki Murakami's because I'm currently studying Japanese. I want to go to Japan, climb some of the mountains there, hopefully get a car there. So I've been trying to learn more and experience more Japanese media and stuff. I definitely can't read novels in Japanese yet, so I've been reading translated ones. And kind of one of the big Japanese authors is Haruki Murakami. I currently teach a lot of Latinos English, and even a couple of them have been like, "Oh, I love Murakami. He's my favorite author." So I was like, "Okay, I gotta give this guy a try. Like, I'm gonna make it my goal to read every Haruki Murakami book." I don't know if I can. I do not think I'm a Murakami guy. I have been struggling with Murakami. Dude, sometimes when I'm reading his stuff, I'm like, please kill me. I hate this. Um, I've some of the women I've talked to, like one of my coworkers, shout out Zoe. She used to work at Barnes and Noble as her second job, and she's always like carrying books around, and she loves books. She writes about books. I think that was her degree, was like literary analysis or something like that. So we talk about books sometimes, and she was talking about women writing men, men writing women. It's fun to talk to her because she definitely has a lot of knowledge and she reads a lot. But one of the things she was talking about, we eventually in conversation, I was like, well, because I think I talked a little bit about Margaret Atwood, about Oryx and Crake, about a woman who wrote men super well, and I also Demon Copperhead by is that Barbara Kingsolver? I think it's Kingsolver. I'll have to look again, but I was like, she wrote these men really well, and I was like, okay, so we were talking about, well, what do you think is the worst man writing a woman? And Zoe said, the first one that comes to mind is Haruki Murakami, which I 100% agree with. The women in these books really hit or miss, and when it's miss, it is miss by like eons. Just horrible, horrible. Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World has some interesting things. I think Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World is the one where it's almost like what is it, Videodrome or something? Basically, corporate espionage. It's in the future, kind of this futuristic thing. Corporate espionage has become so bad that they need to like super encrypt data, and one of the ways that they have found that they can like unbreakably encrypt data is by putting the information directly into like a carrier's brain. It's like a person just takes the information into their brain. So the person becomes like a USB stick. That part was like, oh, that's like really interesting. That's cool. But then the guy meets this girl, and I feel like Murakami like does this description for like so many women. The guy's just like, yeah, she was walking in front of me and I just couldn't stop watching her ass in that pink skirt, and even though she was pretty chunky, pretty big fat girl, I found myself strangely attracted to her. Nobody else would think she's attractive but me. I felt this strange craving for her. And it's just like paragraphs of this, and every time she comes up there has to be like some mention of her ass, or like how she's fat, or she has like a homely face, but he like wants to bang her so much, and like if he tried to, he knows she'd be down. It's just like so many of those. It was so annoying. But also I guess there was kind of like a fault ingrained into these USB stick people, so most of them die. And the guy kind of finds out that he's probably going to die too. He eventually meets the guy who created the USB stick program, who's got like this kind of like nefarious plan. Um, the one thing I did like that kind of made me almost think of like Tarantino conversations and like Tarantino scenes. Um, there's like this little guy and a big guy who come and like I think they give him a thrashing and like destroy his apartment. And like their conversation I think was like kind of weird and funny and like the characters were interesting. Those were things I liked, but also I think part of it is he's them dying is them kind of like going into their mind. So like they're still kind of alive, but they're only alive in their brain in like an alternate reality. Um, and the alternate reality in this one, I think, was they called the end of the world. It's like a more medieval setting, and he's like I can't remember. He's like reading skulls because like the skulls have a history or something. You can like read the history of the skull, and there again, his assistant is kind of like this firekeeper lady. But of course, um, the way Murakami writes about her is like really lecherous and lame, and her character just sucks so bad. And also, I didn't think that the alternate reality was all that interesting, and so like half of the book was a huge bore to me. Um, so really, the best I can do for Hard Boiled Wonderland by Murakami is a C. Like that's literally the I might drop it down, but that's literally the highest I could say for Hard Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. Just man, there's been a couple moments. It sucks because he has a lot of his concepts and like the foundation of his story are really great, but just the way he writes characters sucks. And his conversations sometimes are really cool, really interesting, and sometimes just like super lecherous and just gross or lame. Yeah, I struggle with Murakami. Another one, Zoe actually said, the girl I talked to says she hates this book, but I actually enjoyed it. I can see why she didn't like it. For her, it's really important that there's like really important or like deep women characters in books, and Cormac McCarthy's The Road does not have that. Um, Basically, the primary woman that you hear about in Cormac McCarthy's The Road is the man's, I think it was his wife, not his girlfriend, um, but basically the mother of the child that's with him. She ends up, spoilers for The Road, if it's also an old book, so I don't feel guilty about telling anything about it. But the end of the world comes. It kind of seems like it was maybe a post-nuclear apocalypse that kind of happens. Basically, his wife cannot handle it. She's like, man, if everything sucks and like everything's going to crap, she's like, I'm probably gonna get assaulted, and this is not life to me. So um, I'm gonna end it all. So she offs herself, and the husband is like, no, please don't go. It's really sad. The Road is a very sad book. Um, but I love a lot of the moral dilemmas and kind of some of the quiet moments that happen in The Road. There's a lot of like survival stuff and kind of like when Zoe was describing the book, she said it's only action, which I do not feel is true about The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Um, I definitely feel like there's a lot of character stuff and a lot of things about kind of man's conflict with morality versus what works. Because there's so many moments in the book that are dilemmas. I wish I remembered the names of all the dilemmas, but I know there's like the prisoner's dilemma, and then there's other ones where basically through in life, oftentimes we are encouraged to make awful decisions or do things that really suck and are a net negative for society, to prevent ourselves from being hurt or taken advantage of. Basically, it's a man and a boy. Um, they're trying to get to the sea. They don't even really know if there's anything great at the sea. Everything's destroyed, and it's like very much the man with the boy. The boy have been walking for a while, and so a lot of things have already been looted. So there's almost no food, so they're eating awful things. Almost all of the bullets are guns, so a lot of people have guns that they use to threaten people with, but a lot of people don't necessarily have ammunition. So there's these interesting survival dynamics. But outside of that, they interact with people, and these situations are very tense because you're kind of wondering, is this person going to try and steal from me? Is this person going to try and eat me? Is this person going to try and, assault my son? Is this person going to try and kill us in our sleep? And it's very interesting, the kind of difference between the man's perspective, because the man is like, I need to defend this kid. I need to survive no matter what, like in for a penny, in for a pound. He wants to do whatever it takes to make sure that they're okay. And the son obviously has, kind of a purity to him. So, when the man is like, we can't share our food. Like sometimes they happen upon people who are like in a really bad way, and the kid's like, please let them come with us. Oh, please let us help them. And the man is like, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. We can do that. So kind of these dilemmas, I think, were the actual like nugget of the book of Cormac McCarthy's The Road, where you have this juxtaposition of like the man's like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to survive. I don't care about right or wrong. I'm going to make sure me and my son are safe and taken care of. Versus the boy who kind of has this inherent goodness. He hasn't been as tainted by some of the things that the man has experienced, and maybe he doesn't understand some of the situations. Because it's cool, because the book does both situations where, the man is right. They should have been more careful. Horrible things happen. They encounter horrible things that humans have done in this post-apocalypse. But then also there's moments, and also the finale of the book, where like the boy's goodness is actually what saves them and kind of gives meaning to their life. So I actually feel like there's a lot deeper than the action in Cormac McCarthy's book. Now, I read a lot of Cormac McCarthy before I learned about his personal life. I recently just saw a couple of videos about some things that came out about Cormac McCarthy. Him as a person seems like he was probably a pretty awful, horrible person. The books, definitely I feel like I can see that being true. I love a lot of his books, but also there is a lot of like very like the dark aspects of humanity that are kind of expressed throughout his books. And I also imagine the way he writes about the darkness of humanity, I wouldn't be surprised if Cormac McCarthy hated himself. But yeah, The Road by Cormac McCarthy, I feel like was a good one. Probably not like my favorite or like the most enjoyable thing I've ever read, but I feel like it's a good book. It's one that I could recommend to someone if I felt like it aligned with their tastes. Yeah, I did like it. A book that Zoe did recommend to me was The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. That one, because I was talking to her about how I was reading a lot of like vampire fiction. I was like, that's what I've been reading. Do you have any recommendations for any books in general? And she's like, because you just read Dracula. Maybe you should read this book by, I think his name's Grady Hendrix. His book covers are really fun. I know he's got one. It's like my sister's or my best friend's, my cousin's exorcism or something. And the book looks like a VHS case. He's got a lot of personality. I watched a couple interviews with him. Also interesting. He seems like a super duper fanboy, which is kind of fun because a lot of author videos interviews I watch, they're kind of like intellectuals. And this guy, Grady Hendrix, just seemed like a fanboy. Like he is like super passionate about literature and maybe even like some movies. But in the interview, he's like super excited and he's talking about all this different media that he loves or inspired parts of the book. This one's really interesting because it happens in like the South and it's not that far back in the past. And it's about like kind of a group of women who kind of have a book club, and a vampire invades the town and is, killing kids, taking people. And a couple of the women kind of start to figure out what's going on. But because they're just housewives, nobody takes them seriously. And kind of they do what they can to find the vampire and like repel them. The part of this book that stuck out the most to me was very great horror. It's this scene where the lady goes to the vampire's house and she hides in the attic, and there's this part where like the vampire comes up and he's like looking for her, and he's trying to get her to come out of her hiding spot. So he's like saying things like, "Oh, there you are. Jig is up, just come out." But she's like not staying still because she's like, "I think he's just trying to trick me," because he's ancient, so he's like really shrewd. And I think like cockroaches and like a bug like crawls like into her nose, and just the way he wrote that scene, like the tension and the suspense was really effective. Like he did a great job in that scene. Um, if you're like into like female empowerment and like stuff like that or feminism, you'd probably love the ending of this book, because the lady, she's like not appreciated in the home, so she gets a divorce and stuff. Um, I some of that stuff towards the end I felt was like a little ooh, where's my water bottle? Ah, some of that stuff towards the end of the book I felt like was kind of heavy-handed, but overall it was a pretty good story. Like I did enjoy this one enough. There were definitely a lot of parts where it felt like a slog, or I felt like the characters were doing things that didn't make sense. That felt like off, or like it was contrived for the story. It was pretty good. I think I'll give this one like a B. But if you've read a lot of vampire things and you haven't read this one but you love vampire fiction, I'd say it's worth a read. Like the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires it's pretty good. It's a good one. I think this is The Strange Library by Haruki Murakami. This is another Murakami. This one was really zany, really weird. What's the? It's not the Book of Life. I can't remember. What is it? There's a movie I watched as a kid that honestly I feel like is not that popular, but it was a banger. Like it was a great movie. It was like this nerdy kid, and I think he is obsessed with safety. Safety. So he has like this like bicycle, but he wears like a helmet, and he has like all these flashing lights and a flag and like a bumper on the bike. And he like when he goes on the bike, he has like elbow and knee pads, and he's wearing like a yellow construction vest. He's like very risk averse. He goes to the library and he gets like sucked into the books, and he's in like Around the World in 80 Days, or like Moby Dick and Jekyll and Hyde, Treasure Island, and so he goes on these adventures, and he like learns to love adventure. It's a cool movie, and it's also awesome because it's like kind of half animated, half live action. It's when they were doing that stuff, so it's awesome. I can't remember the title now. It sucks, but I'll find it later. If anyone knows the title, put it in the comments. um, this one kind of made me think of that. Basically, the boy goes to a library. It feels like Murakami's attempt at writing like a children's book, which was weird. But the child basically gets kidnapped by the librarian and like put in the basement. And basically they're like, hey, you need to read these books because we're brain suckers and we want to like eat your brain, but we want the brain to be good quality. So they like make him read in its entirety this book that's like how the Ottomans collected taxes in their Ottoman Empire, and then like another like super obtuse book. And so they make him read these crazy books so they can like suck his brain, and then he meets like a magical girl or animal or whatever, and it's how they get out of the library. It felt very psychedelic. It wasn't all that interesting to me. Wasn't that entertaining to me. It was meh. It was all right. This one I'd probably give a D just because like it was short, but I was still bored, and that's really bad. Like if it's like a short like novella, basically a little bit chunkier than a short story, like you should not be bored. There's not enough content that someone should be bored with that. So yeah, Strange Library by Haruki Murakami is getting a D. Um, Speaking of boredom, we'll talk a little bit about Titus Grown by Mervyn Peake. This is another one that I read because I was looking for books that kind of have they were on a list where people were giving suggestions about themes or atmosphere or settings that are kind of comparable to Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Definitely the kingdom and the world does share similarities to Dark Souls. And some of the effectiveness of how they wrote that is awesome. It's this kind of castle, this great castle that's been modified and built on, so it's got all these different crazy styles. Kind of makes me think of like Anor Londo in Dark Souls. It's been like super overbuilt. It's an ancient kingdom, and it's definitely past its prime. So like the ruling class is like these really kind of shitty monarchs who they're kind of inbred because their monarchy is, you know, by blood, and they're also inept. Like they do a lot of their traditions just out of, you know, practice, because that's the way things are. They don't understand why, or they misinterpret a lot of how to do things. A lot of the descriptions of, you know, the guy going through the roofs of the castle really made me think of Anor Londo. There's buildings that are just like filled with spiders. Made me think of, you know, moments in Dark Souls. But the story for this one, I felt like was kind of boring, and I felt like it really missed the mark. For me, I feel like the book should have been satire, and we should have been really satisfied with some of the things that happen. We should be rooting for the kind of rebellious guy. So basically, there's a guy who, because in this kingdom, your role is kind of chosen for you. He is assigned to be basically a line cook. And he's like, damn, dude, I don't want to be a line cook. Like, this sucks. He escapes, and he kind of gets a chance. He breaks into the castle, and he kind of gets a chance to be an assistant there, and he kind of proves himself. And he starts to realize how inept and awful the monarchy is. And they have this like heir to the throne that's born. And he starts just experience them, and he tries to like, he like seduces these like two old ladies who, and he like pits them against each other, who are twins, who have like power in the monarchy. And those kind of aspects were kind of funny, and it felt like it was starting towards satire. But there's one moment where like he burns, because basically they don't know anything. These people suck, so they basically get all of their traditions and like how they operate the kingdom from like these old tomes in a library. He burns the library down, and he like, and some people like I think die in the fire. And the book tries to, it felt like the book was trying to like make it sad, but like me personally, I was not rooting for any of the monarchy. I was like, yeah, like burn it down and get him out of there. So I didn't like the tone of the book, and also like the heir to the throne escapes, and the end of the book is like, oh, he's gonna return. He's gonna, you know, the rebellious guy is gonna get what's his. But for me, I was like, this monarchy like sucks. Like they suck. Like they need to be uprooted. This kingdom should upheave. So the themes and the tone of the book I didn't like. The setting was cool, but the themes and tone in the book, and it was a pretty long one, and there were portions of it where I was real bored. I was bored at several points in Titus Grown. When I was like reading it and like looking up the title, I've heard some people say that there's like kind of a camp movie or mini series that's like British or something, so I might have to watch that, see if it maybe makes me like it more. Maybe they did that better. But yeah, at some point I might try and give that a watch, but this book is definitely not one of my favorites. Next up, what is that one? Dude, I don't even know if I can remember what happened. I might have to look up one of these. I do remember this one, Yoko Gawa's Revenge. This one was pretty cool. A lot of the times I don't like separate or disjointed stories, so I'm always impressed when it works. And I think I've been coming to realize that Yoko Gawa might be one of my favorite Japanese authors. Like, I love a lot of the stuff she does. This book, Revenge, is like a collection. I think it was 10, maybe it was 8 or 12. I think it was an even number that was around there. I think it was 10 short stories. And it doesn't emphasize that they're connected, but kind of each story kind of connects a little bit to the next one. And there were some that were like very interesting. Like a guy who has kind of like he owns a taxidermy, a museum. There's one about a murder that happens at a hospital because someone's upset about an affair. There's all of them are kind of themed around revenge. I think my favorite one though, spoilers. I don't know if you're ever gonna read this, but I'm gonna describe it because I think the concept was badass. Basically, there's a woman, and it is kind of like a horror book. Like it's a little unsettling. A lot of the stories. Basically, this woman, her heart is outside of her body. Like she has like a defect where her heart is outside of her body, and she is like, oh, it's dangerous and like it hurts. So I need to protect it. So she finds like the greatest purse master, the purse maker in the world. And so he's like really good at sewing leather. And she's like, I want you to create a custom made like cover for my heart. So it's like this very intimate, close thing, him measuring her and like spending years to choose the perfect leather. I think he settles with like seal skin on the inside and then some other leather on the outside, and he spends a long time crafting this thing, and he's like, this is the only thing that exists like this, a perfectly molded kind of pouch that she can wear like strapped on, to protect her heart. But the day that he finishes it, he goes to her, and it turns out she found like a doctor who's like kind of experimental, who's like, oh, I can just do a surgery and put your heart back inside of you. And so she just does that, and she's like, actually, I don't need the leather thing. Here's the money though. Anyway, like, thanks for your time. And he just feels like his art and his craft was just so wasted and useless and disrespected that he becomes livid, and he, goes to enact his revenge. I think part of why I love that story is because, I studied design and art, and I love both of those things. And I think those things in, movies, literature, music, painting, design, a lot of those things are the things that make, a lot of the meat and, wonder of life. And just AI just being like, oh yeah, like, we'll just make some crap, just copy and paste, kind of make an amalgamation of some things that existed previously, and it's basically the same. It's fine. And just like feeling angry at that. So I really loved that short story. I also love kind of the Yoko Ogawa covers that they've got, like a lot of her, especially like the Japanese covers. I love how they're kind of together. I'm gonna put this one as a B. It's a strong B. Depending on what else we put in these tiers, I might bump it up to an A. Next up, let's talk about Dracula. When I was young, as I've said before, I was like really just so like had no exposure to rated R movies, but it's a phenomena that I think is like super interesting, where when I was in school, I became aware of all these pop culture things without ever experiencing them. So I would like say, like lines from Arnold Schwarzenegger movies like The Terminator or Rambo, or say things like going Rambo, but I had never seen Rambo. I had never seen The Terminator. And it's funny because a lot of the moments that people share from these movies are often in like the sequels, like Rambo. The one that everyone's referencing, I think, is like one of the second ones, when he's like going ballistic in Vietnam. Because the like Rambo First Blood, like the actual Rambo that's like based off of the novel, is just, he's like a PTSD'd vet who gets like abused by the police and like goes nuts. That's the thing, that's the phenomena that I think is interesting, is like I have some exposure, so I had a preconceived notion of what that pop culture thing was in my mind from the context that people would use. But then when I experienced the media, sometimes it was like jarring. It was like this cognitive dissonance where I was like, what the heck? This is Rambo? This is like a very like quiet, like almost sad story that's like much more, it's like less gung-ho action. But then I saw one of the second ones. I was like, okay, this is the Rambo that they were talking about. But that's kind of what I have with a lot of these like classics. You see cartoons or all these references of Frankenstein, of Dracula, Moby Dick, and you're like, yeah, like that's what it is. But then when you actually experience the original source material, sometimes you're like, it's jarring. You're like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And that's what I had with Dracula. I didn't think I was going to like Dracula. I was like, I'm probably not going to like this book. It's probably going to be boring, probably going to kind of suck. But I loved Dracula. And also, it was like way more contemporary than I thought. Like, I'm pretty sure they had flashlights and Kodak cameras in this book, which I thought Dracula was way further back when the story actually happens. I like Dracula. I like this book a lot. I feel like it kind of dipped a little bit. Some of the momentum slowed down in the latter third. But the start of this book, I love the mystery and kind of like the horror as the man starts to realize something is wrong, and how the book kind of like pulls you into it, and how it describes the horror of the eyes and the animals in the night or whatever. But like the description of Dracula, how he's like this very charismatic, intelligent, well-traveled man who's like handsome with, dark hair, that he maintains really well, and he's very charming. And how the main character is this guy who's like just on vacation. Like, it's funny because like it's written as like a diary, and so at the first part, before he knows like basically that there is a vampire, things are going wrong, it's kind of like a dude's travel vlog. And it's kind of funny how much it seems like there are moments where it just feels like someone's like Instagram or like travel vlog, what they would say, how he's just like, yeah, I stopped by at this restaurant in this town, and like the potatoes were amazing, man, and the drinks were like local, and it was really great. And like that's how the book starts, and it feels like a dude who's just like kind of writing about his travels, and he's like, oh yeah, like this restaurant was good, I saw this thing. And then it just kind of like transitions into like this horror of like, oh, I'm like stuck in this castle, I'm pretty sure this guy is gonna eat me. um and also how they like work to fight back towards the vampire, and they try to outsmart him, is pretty cool. I'm gonna give Dracula, by the OG Dracula by Bram Stoker, an A. I liked it. I would recommend it. If you haven't read Dracula, like, give it a go. I feel like it holds up, and it's surprisingly more modern than I thought it was. Like, it doesn't feel that ancient. Like, it's a good one, and it's not. It's very different from what I expect. I expected like, I want to fuck your dogs. I want to, I want to suck your blood, but it wasn't like that kind of cartoonish vampire. Like it felt much more human, which was cool. Next up, we're going to talk about Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. I read this, and then I actually got into Cormac McCarthy through Man Caring Thing. When I loved the movie No Country for Old Men. I love that movie a lot. I think Anton Chigurh is a very interesting character, and the way the movie progresses is very fascinating. But I didn't know it was a Cormac McCarthy book when I first watched it. I just watched it because I love kind of those modern Western kind of noirs in the desert, kind of like Hell or High Water. Oh, man, I was thinking of another one. Eddington was kind of interesting, although it was heavy-handed in parts. But yeah, I watch some Man Caring Thing videos, and I sometimes enjoy the way he talks about current events or books. So I'll give Cormac McCarthy a try. And the one that I feel like Man Caring Thing talks about the most is Blood Meridian. So that's the one I started with. Kind of makes me think of The Revenant. I'm trying to think of other. Was Bone Tomahawk or whatever it's called, just horrible Western where it's like kind of focused more on like an unromantic Western, where it's focused more on like kind of the bleak, dark truth of a lot of what happened. Obviously it's like sometimes sensationalized, but when you look back at American history, I mean, a lot of it was like massacres or insanely horrible things in the Wild West. And I thought some of the themes were very interesting, like man's relationship to war and evil and violence, which was interesting, and also technological advancements, placement in warfare. A boy kind of how he gets eased into just committing atrocities and just the absolute, yeah, the violence of the Wild West. Like this book, it's a very violent and miserable book. If you want like a nice book that's like entertaining or a feel good book, would not recommend Blood Meridian. But I do have to say, some of the poetry of how he describes these conflicts, kind of, what's his name? He's the judge. The judge has these conversations where he kind of talks about some ideas that some people actually have, like manifest destiny or man's dominion over other men or animals. That kind of aspect was interesting, and how the judge is like a horrific, terrifying creature. Like he's a man, but he's awful. It's and the ending is just bleak and horrible. But yeah, if you want a very violent, hopeless, just bloody, unromantic Western, Blood Meridian could be good for you. It's written really well. There's like when they talk about some of the beauty of the nature of the suns, and like the moment where they're like going through the tarot cards was also very interesting. I'm gonna give this one a B for now. It's definitely not one of my favorites. I might even drop it down. I might even drop it down to C. We'll see. Next up, let's do. We'll do Malice, just because I can't remember like anything about this book. I remember enjoying it well enough, but it didn't really stick with me. I think this is the one where maybe one of the detectives or people who like help solve is a woman. Um, I just like the way Keigo Higashino writes, and I think he comes up with some interesting like little mystery stories. I would not recommend the Japanese TV show about any of his detective stories, because like they're just like way too camp to the point where it's unbearable. The only reason I'm putting this one in D is just because it was unmemorable. It wasn't boring. Like it was enjoyable. Like I remember like liking it and just progressing steadily through it and like, oh, that's a nice detective story. But I can barely remember anything, so it didn't really stick with me. It was nice, enjoyable read, but I couldn't. I don't know if I could really recommend it. I'd say, yeah, if you love detective stuff, read Keigo Higashino stuff. But out of all of his books, this would not be the first one that I recommend, because I can't remember. I can't remember anything from it. Let's do More Days at the Murasaki Bookshop. I did not like this book. More Days at the Murasaki Bookshop was an interesting one. I'll probably talk about it later. Just about a girl who's like very stressed about her future, going to a relative's small town bookshop and operating it, and just kind of figuring out how to love life, and live. Just live. And her relationship with I don't know, her kind of uncle and his like estranged wife or girlfriend or something. And the reason she ran away is because she had to deal with having spoilers. She had to deal with having cancer or something like that, and she didn't want people to pity her or really hold that against her. This book, I didn't like it because it was extremely dismal. Um, it tries to end on like a positive note, but I didn't feel like it successfully did. I still felt kind of awful at the end. The first book, I felt like they were heading towards some sort of positivity. Yeah, they had trials and stuff, but it was kind of about them kind of coming out of it. But More Days at the Murasaki Bookshop, it kind of touches on death. One of the important characters passes away. And I just felt like it was a story that didn't need a sequel. It didn't need to be revisited, especially in this way. I feel like this almost undermines some of what was great and happened in the first book. So this one I'm also going to give a D to. Next up, we're going to talk about James by Percival Everett. You can see these big fat golden circles on the cover. This one got a bunch of awards. It was like kind of the darling, I think, of the year. At Barnes & Noble, it was like on the front desk. They're like, you need to read this book, James, by Percival Everett. It is an interesting book. Basically, frick. Is it Tom Sawyer or is it Huckleberry Finn? I think it's Huckleberry Finn. Yeah, I think it's Huckleberry Finn. Basically, it's a reimagining, it's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn. If I'm wrong and it's Tom Sawyer, you can call me an idiot in the comments. It's fine. But I think it's a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, but from the perspective of Jim, the slave. There are some interesting things in this book that I feel conflicted about. Like, the thing I feel conflicted about is it's kind of funny. It is kind of funny. So basically, all of the slaves use black speak. So, master, master. They talk like that only because they don't want to catch any shade or like make the white people feel nervous or inferior, because then they'll do horrible things to them. They'll beat them and or torture them or whatever. So that when they're alone, they're speaking eloquently. They're very erudite. But then when they're around white people, they're speaking, like, oh, master, like that kind of stuff. I feel conflicted about this because it does kind of, in a way, it's also reinforcing the idea that, more British English or that system of speaking English is superior. The fact that they have to do this. And the reality of it is that a lot of these people who were brought over and learned English and kind of had their own kind of English, and this kind of maybe also is connected to Pidgin English, which is an amazing phenomenon. I was lucky enough to spend some time with some Africans when I was in Italy, meeting people from Senegal, Nigeria and other African countries. And yeah, their English, the way they spoke English was a bit different. And it's kind of crazy. I mean, back then, the reason I was meeting them was because I was on a religious mission. And I remember, it probably sounds insane and corny, but like back then, like I remember I literally prayed to be able to understand this one Nigerian guy's English, because it was my first time being exposed to Pidgin English. And it like took me a couple months to get used to it, because Pidgin English was different enough that like hearing them, like there were a lot of sentences that were just like lost on me. But it's a different English, but it's an amazing phenomenon. Africa is a huge country with many, many languages, not even the primary languages like French and English that are spoken in some of the countries, but a lot of the countries, they have tribes that have, their primary language is this very unique language. But Pidgin English has allowed a lot of these African countries to communicate with each other. It's an amazing phenomenon. It sounds like black speak, but there's a lot of beauty in what many would call, I guess, proper English or British English or whatever you want to call it. But languages change. They develop. The English that we speak is different from like a lot of the Old English or the Germanic or Proto-Germanic stuff. Languages change. So, when you say that one is better or worse than the other, is it because of the effectiveness of the communication, or is it because of how you feel about the people who speak it? So I felt kind of conflicted about basically them, having the slaves say in the book that like they speak in an inferior way to trick the whites. It's a very funny moment, but at the same time, it's just kind of reinforcing that the way that black people speak isn't, because that is a reality that some black people do not do it as a trick. There's a lot of black people who speak Pidgin English or kind of broke English. That's what they speak, not as a gimmick or a trick. That's what they speak. And it was a very funny bit in the book, but I was like, it's like kind of reinforcing an idea that way of speaking is inferior. So I felt conflicted about that. There are also some kind of like heavy-handed things about like him meeting an androgynous character and stuff that I wasn't upset by it. I could tell some people are like, oh, like he's tarnishing. Mark Twain would be pissed. I don't know. I feel like Mark Twain could have liked this book, actually. There are a lot of really funny moments. But if Mark Twain wouldn't have liked it, dude, like who cares? Like different era. And it's cool that There's a black writer out there who wants to engage with this media. Um, I will say I became less interested towards the like there's like right before probably the climax and resolution. There was a lot where he's like running away that I felt like was a little bit less interesting. Some of the stuff about like him with the musicians, I was like, I wasn't as interested. Something that really bothers a lot of people that I was a part of the book I actually loved. Um, there's a part where Jim like kind of gets poisoned and he has like a fever dream. And in the fever dream, he starts to talk to some other writers and like philosophers. Like at one point, he has a conversation with Voltaire, which I thought was really funny, and their conversation, in my opinion, was really interesting. But people are like, Voltaire hadn't been translated into English by that point, and just the timing doesn't quite work. I don't care. I don't care. It's an anachronism, but I enjoyed that part of the book. I'm going to put this one, it's a solid, in my opinion. James by Percival Everett is a solid B. I'd say it's a pretty good one, but it wasn't one of my favorites. It wasn't close to being one of my favorites, but it's a good enough read. It was nice. Next up, we'll do another one since we talked about Dracula. We'll do another one where I was like, I'm going to go and actually experience a classic. Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster. Ton of appearances in pop culture, advertisements, costumes, movies, TV shows, tangential references. Yeah. So I was like, I'm going to finally read this. A lot of people are always talking about how it's like the first sci-fi book. Can kind of see it. It was very interesting how different this was than what I was expecting. Insanely different. The first part of it just being so dedicated to the doctor and him being like obsessed with achieving success and him being very studious. It was very interesting. Like, she must have been an incredible person to have written this. It's very, Frankenstein was interesting book. There's a lot that doesn't sit right with me about Frankenstein, the book, but I mean, it's an old book. It's like insanely old. What is it? It's like early 1800s, I think. Which is insane when you read it, to think it's like the opposite of Dracula, where Dracula is like, oh my God, I can't believe this is so modern. Frankenstein, it's like the opposite. I'm like, I can't believe this is so old. Very interesting, that aspect of it. And very funny how the monster kind of becomes more human and like what he's exposed to. I think he listens to them, like a family, like reading John Milton's Paradise Lost, I think, is a big part of where he like gets his own morality from at the start. It is interesting as kind of an examination on nature versus nurture and like what is humanity and stuff like that with the monster. What's weird for me is when I hear a lot of people be like, the monster wasn't the bad guy. It was misunderstood. I mean, kind of. I think it's weird when people like glaze or kind of fetishize the monster a lot. He was supposed to be ugly and scary. He's ugly and scary in the book. And that's like one of the big problems. But because that, he kind of, in my opinion, kind of becomes an incel. And some people are like, well, he doesn't say what he wanted as a companion. The doctor assumed that he wanted a wife. I don't know. From what I was reading, maybe it's my own bad bias, but I did feel like the monster was at some point said a couple things about like, he says he wants a companion, but at some point it felt like he was talking about like wanting a family or to create. And the doctor was also worried about him maybe having the capacity to procreate. But, yeah. It felt like a lot of the book, a lot of the conflict comes from the monster basically like being like, make me a bitch, give me a bitch now, and like justifying, I mean, being alone and like scorned is awful. Like, it really sucks. But I don't think that can like justify murdering a ton of people or ruining a ton of people's lives, getting people sentenced to death, killing children, because that's what the monster does. The monster does because I thought maybe, oh, the monster like scares some people. Maybe he accidentally hurt someone because he's so big and strong. Because people are always like, the monster's misunderstood. The monster's the good guy. The monster's the main character. In the book, he did atrocious things. He did horrible things. The monster is terrifying. It was also interesting the start because like it's a story inside of a story, which I guess I started the movie from Guillermo del Toro. I need to finish it. I only watched like the first 20 minutes. I had to go do something. Haven't gone back to it, but it was one thing I didn't expect is that like there's this whole other backstory of a guy who's like he's like trying to reach the North Pole or something like that. That's like the person who's telling the story, and how that intersects with the story of Frankenstein was interesting. This book, no shade to, I think it's Mary Shelley. Yeah, Mary Shelley wrote it. Um, Incredible that she wrote this. Incredible when it was written. It is not one of my favorite books, but it was interesting. And I would say it's worth giving it a read, but I have no desire to return to Frankenstein. It is like a crazy artifact of literature. So it would be worth, give it a read if you haven't yet. It's not that long. And it's not really boring for the most part. For the most part, things are happening. Things are happening in this book. But it just, a lot of the themes and what happens didn't really reach me. Next up, we're going to do An Artist of the Floating World. This book is by Kazuo Ishiguro. I love the way Kazuo Ishiguro writes. A lot of his stories maybe aren't my favorite. I love his themes, and I love the way he writes. A lot of his themes have to do with like cognitive dissonance and just having to cope or come to terms with the fact that either society changed or you receive new information that makes you kind of realize, oh, I was wrong, and just how different people cope or move on from that. Basically, An Artist of the Floating World, it was one of, if not his first novel, it might be his first novel. It's one of his earlier works. And also him, I've watched a lot of interviews with Kazuo Ishiguro, very interesting guy in my opinion. But basically, in this book, it's a little bit after the World War II, I believe. And so it's about a famous painter. Well, he was famous. And he has these, paintings that are like covered and in storage. They're not hung up anymore because basically a lot of the painting that he did was kind of propagandistic. It was nationalistic, kind of propaganda paintings. And he was very masterful and he was famous, but now that stuff was attached to him. And he kind of talks with other artists who were kind of up and about around the same time he was, going to a cafe, talking in the past, and just kind of talking about how some of the artists, different of them, are coping with the fact that what their life work is now kind of scorned because of Japan trying to distance itself after having lost the war from those kind of nationalistic ideas, which is pretty interesting now, especially the direction a lot of the world is going, and especially Japan is kind of, it seems, dipping a little bit more into nationalism, which is a little bit concerning. I mean, it's tough with globalization. How do you maintain your identity? It's tough. I understand that stuff, especially with Japan, where you're like this small, you're an island nation. Like Japan's a pretty big island, but it's a little island compared to a lot of other countries. And they've got this very kind of esoteric, jumbled language. So I kind of get it. But back to the novel. It's interesting. It's an interesting idea. Having, being very talented, growing, having a life work, being praised for it, and then by even some of the same people, them trying to be like, oh yeah, like never happened, like we're not going to talk about it. I didn't find it that entertaining or interesting or engaging. It was all right. I'd probably give this one like a C, just for the themes alone or carrying it. But as the story and stuff, I didn't find it that compelling or engaging or interesting. Um, Next up, we'll do The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. This is another one that I read because it was on a list of stuff that people were like, oh, it's kind of like Dark Souls. This one, don't really see it, not a whole lot. Maybe kind of like the like twisted kind of, sometimes like the characters, like the villains, the bosses you fight in Elden Ring and Dark Souls have like this kind of crazy backstory. Maybe that about like the main characters and the doctor. This one's kind of weird because like I was okay with the story. I adore the ending of this book. It's going to be what carries it a lot for me. This is a rare case where what I actually hated about the book was the writing style. I hate Cassandra Khaw's writing style. I'm so sorry, but I disliked it insanely. That's a lot. I just did it. It rubbed me the wrong way. Um, there'd be like very like casual kind of modern feeling speech that would be like smashed into very eloquent or just like $40 words, just like these massive insane words. And sometimes there'd be words that kind of seemed made up. Sometimes it seemed that there were words that were very fancy words but were used in a way that felt improper. I was like, does that actually mean what you think it means? It was clunky to get through. There were like some poetic sentences, and then right next to that there'd be an awkward sentence, and then right after that there'd be like a sentence that didn't even make sense. So I did not like her writing style. The story is all right, kind of about a siren kind of mermaid. I think she's kind of like betrayed by her husband or something, so her and her daughters like eat the king in the kingdom or whatever. And then she goes on a journey with her plague doctor. They kind of bond through their journey, and what we really see is a moment where they find this little town of these doctors who claim to have discovered immortality, but throughout the town there's a bunch of children who are like missing body parts and maimed. So I'm sure you can kind of infer what the horrific thing is that's happening. And just they kind of, go to town on them, and there's a conflict. And then at the end, spoilers, what I actually love about this book is I feel like it's a good depiction of love in a book. I feel like some books do like romance and stuff, but I don't feel like they really nail love. In the end of the book, again, spoilers, the siren, because she's like this super mystical like creature, she ends up okay, but the plague doctor is obliterated. I think they're like burnt at the stake or something. But she takes a piece of him, and she researches, because she's more immortal because she's a mermaid or whatever. She researches for years and years and years and figures out how to basically recreate him. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like that feels like a narrative depiction of love that I could get behind. That was cool. That same story, kind of like Frankenstein, though, definitely has like, it's a dark kind of gothic book, but unfortunately, because of the writing style and a lot of like just the dead ends of this book, I can't really put it that high. Great ending, but man, I don't like the majority of this book. It's not that long. It's one that I could kind of maybe recommend, but it's nowhere near my favorites. So it's getting a C. Let's do another Murakami. We'll talk about Dance, Dance, Dance. Murakami has some things that kind of connect through some of his books and stories. Like there's this character called the Sheep Man, who's like a kind of a man who wears a sheep outfit, and sheep play a big, I don't know why, but they play like a big part in a lot of his stories. It's kind of weird. I mean, I read A Wild Sheep Chase, but even then, I'm like, I don't know why he's so fixated on sheep. It's kind of weird. Um, this book, bizarre, very bizarre. Um, Kind of interesting. Kind of, I think, I don't know if it was this one. No, A Wild Sheep Chase is the one that made me think of The Crying of Lot 41, 42. I can't remember. 32? I can't remember the number now. Um, I don't remember a lot of this book. I probably blocked it out of my mind. I think in this book, the main thing I remember from the middle is he has a conversation with the sheep man in like a dream. And he's in a funk. He's like in a rut. He's like really depressed. The sheep man talks about how like you can't give up. You can't stop living. You can't just kill yourself or just like live but not live. Until the music is done, you need to dance, dance, dance. So I thought that was cool. That was like the only thing I think I liked from this book. Um, a lot of it is just with me and blurs, and it blends with a lot of the other Murakamis because he does a lot of the same stuff over and over again. I remember. Oh, I think this is the one where he's like basically getting cucked. Um, yeah, I think this is the one where he basically became super obsessed and like in love with the girl from the last book, who is like an ex escort or something like that. I think this one is the sequel to A Wild Sheep Chase. He's obsessed with her and he misses her because she just like disappeared while he was like looking for, I don't know, the sheep guy or the sheep with the star or whatever the hell it was. And he's like, oh, he starts going to the movie theaters and he finds a movie and there's a romance, a sex scene in the movie between, and the actress is the girl that was his like ex, or I guess the girl from the last book. But because he's obsessed with her, he like goes and watches the movie over and over and over and over again. So he's just watching her, and he's like, I wonder if it's real or not. But like he's just watching her in this sex scene with this other guy, over and over again. And I think she's not like a huge part of the movie. So he's like watching the movie for this one part where she's there, and he's like trying to find her. I think in the second half of the book, I think this is where I was like, this book can't be saved. I think maybe it's the other one, maybe it's a Silent Parade or one of the, I can't remember, because he does this a lot. He develops a friendship with an underage girl, and I think this is, yeah, because I think in this one he drives like I think it's a Subaru Impreza or a WRX. And he gives her rides and they like spend a lot of time together. They eventually go on a vacation together and her mom is like encouraging. It's really weird. Like their whole thing is just gross. Like it sucks. I don't know. He does in several of Murakami's books that I've read now. There's like a weird kind of relationship that the main character has with an underage girl where there's tension, which just sucks. It's just gross. And then there's like a rich guy who maybe was like losing his mind. He has to borrow his car for some reason and ends up like driving a car or something into the ocean to kill himself because maybe he's guilty about killing maybe the woman that the sheep guy is looking for. It wasn't that interesting. That little nugget about not giving up on dancing until the music starts is like the only redeeming factor of this book for me. This one, I don't know, F or D. I guess I'll put in D just because I had that one nugget. It wasn't like, but man, it just sucked. It sucks. Next up, we'll do Invisible Helix. This one I'll give a C to. This is it's in a series where the detective, I think, Murder of Suspect X, Galileo, Professor Galileo, that's what they call him. Basically, he's not really a detective. He's just like he's like a physicist or something like that at a reputable university, and the detectives keep going to him to consult because a lot of the times he uses like really interesting science to solve the mystery. This one, the science didn't feel as deep. and the resolution of the mystery had to do with like the reason it's double helix, invisible helix. I'm sorry, I think is because it's like referencing DNA. Because like the twist of the book is someone being the child of someone, like someone being related to someone. The twist for this one and the science in this one, I didn't feel like were as good or as interesting as some of his others. So this was not my favorite in the Galileo series, but the way he writes and I don't know, however they translate it is just nice. I enjoy the Keigo Higashino mysteries. Next up, we're going to talk about Monstrillo. I think this one's by a Mexican author. I saw this one on like a best of kind of novellas list. It was very interesting, however, extremely dismal and like kind of perverse and disturbing. In this one, so like there's a mother and father and they have a good relationship, but then like their child dies very young. And they're both obviously devastated. But the way the mom copes with it is like kind of insane. She doesn't want to let go of all of the son. So she actually kind of like butchers the son. She wants to keep one of his lungs. Because I guess part of why he died is because he was born with like a shrunken lung, like a defective lung. And so she's like, I'm going to take the lung from him. And she keeps it in a jar. And I guess one of her like Mexican relatives or friends told her a folk story, and it's like a folk story where they have a lung in a jar and they feed it and it grows into a monster, which is essentially what happens. And the lung kind of grows into this kind of freaky little cat monster ooze thing that more and more resembles a boy, more and more resembles her son, and I guess has some elements of his personality, but also he needs to eat meat and he's like kind of violent and bites people, and eventually he I guess he's gay, and I think he goes on like, what is it called, online dating, and he like finds some spoilers. He finds a kind of insecure, abused boy, and they date for a little bit, and I think he like eats the guy because the guy's like, yeah, you can bite me, like it's fine, and he just starts eating people. I think I'm not sure if it was just supposed to be like a kind of horror story or if there was like a theme of like being able to let go of horrific loss. Otherwise, it's going to kind of destroy your life and your relationships, because it does destroy kind of the woman's relationship with her husband. The next men she meets in her life, her kind of even her relationship with her own family when she goes back to move in with her own family. Very bizarre book. I didn't really enjoy it. I'd probably give it a D. It's written all right, some interesting ideas, but did not really enjoy it. I'll talk about Water for Elephants by what is it, Sarah? I think Sarah Gruen. Pretty interesting one. This was a pretty interesting book. Historical fiction, a guy who kind of runs away, gets kind of pulled into like circus life and kind of the culture of the circus, and the workers is the culture of the circus and the workers is kind of interesting. There's a romance that happens that's kind of messed up. She's with kind of a leader of the circus. The main character wanted to be a veterinarian, but or he wanted to be a doctor maybe, but he stopped going right before he graduated because I think his father, a parent or someone died, and so he just quit going to college, and so he gets to become the veterinarian of the circus because he has some of this knowledge, even though he doesn't have a degree, and just him kind of growing, kind of coming of age, and then this one has a little bit of back and forth from the present to him telling his life story, because right now he's an old man in a nursing home. This is one story I feel like actually did the kind of back and forth, like multiple storylines effectively. It doesn't feel like it really detracts from what's going on. And the ending is kind of awesome. And like him kind of getting some freedom and his kind of, you know, rebellious self, and just the fact that nobody now knows other than people who work in the circus who can understand, you know, the amazing life that he led. So this one it was a pretty interesting book. I think it was good enough. Yeah, you know what? I'll put him B. I'd say it was good enough to be a B. Water for Elephants. I need to watch the movie. Someday I'm gonna do like a video on like watching movies from books, because I feel like there's a lot of argument for that. But I feel like I'm starting to realize that sometimes people are like, the book is always better. Sometimes the movie's better. Like Drive My Car. That one is, in my opinion, way better than the short story and the entire collection of short stories that it's inspired by. Next up, we'll do Norwegian Wood. Again, sometimes it's hard for me to remember Murakami, like all the details, because his descriptions and a lot of the things that he does and a lot of the ways that he writes just paragraphs are the same between his books. Interviews with him and like his forwards, I think he seems like an interesting person. But his books, man, some of them I just don't know. Some interesting concepts, but woof. Norwegian Wood. In this one, I think it mostly follows like a guy who's kind of like a student and like some relationships that he has with some women, and him kind of like going through college. Really, some kind of funny moments like with the radio, and him wanting to work out, but his roommate being kind of weird, and like some of that stuff is kind of funny. Does kind of sometimes feel like Tarantino-ish conversations to me, which isn't bad. It's like all right. It's like kind of entertaining, sometimes thought-provoking, but again, just the girl who's like in the mental institution and like their relationship is just kind of gross and it sucks. And then there's a character who was like, oh my gosh, like I actually love this character. I love her personality and the way she speaks and the way she's written. But then they kind of go into some of her backstory. She is a musician, and I think she was teaching. I think she can play the guitar now, but she teaches piano, and she had a student who's like a girl, like underage, like definitely a young girl, who was kind of like, I think she was like sort of a prodigy, and she was like really great to teach, but she was also like, the woman was talking about how she was like super beautiful, super pretty, which again, Murakami, dude, just leave it alone. But I guess the young girl got upset because she wanted like concessions or like more flexibility from the piano teacher. So the young girl kind of succeeds in seducing the piano teacher, who is a woman. But yeah, it's girl on girl, but she is very underaged. And yeah, it's like kind of non-consensual, but still it's just like an adult with a child, and that's why she feels so guilty or whatever. So that's why she put herself in this like mental institution. I don't know. This one was one I feel like I've heard a lot of people say they love Norwegian Wood. They're like, oh god, Norwegian Wood is such a good book. I think even PewDiePie mentioned how he loved Norwegian Wood. And for me, I'm just like, dude, why? Some of the aspects of like kind of the nostalgia of him talking about being in college and how he's in like a very unique college. It was kind of interesting, but outside of that, I don't remember much of the ending themes. I think part of the problem is like when it gets to these parts where Murakami is just like being really creepy or like having stuff with like, underage people, I genuinely kind of start to like tune out. So I can't remember a lot of Norwegian Wood, and you know, meh. I remember some interesting things, but again, D. This one's gonna get a D for me. Just bleh. Um, let's do Strange Pictures. This was a little book that I was really worried was going to be a gimmick book because they're like, oh, it's horror but with drawings. And I was like, yeah, this is probably going to suck. Probably won't be that good. This one was actually really, really interesting. Like the twists and like trying to look at the drawing and figure out like, yeah, what's wrong with these drawings? And then as the book kind of like says, oh, this is what's wrong with it. And you go, oh, that's crazy. Maybe this is happening. That's messed up. Um, and also just what happens at the end, like it's kind of a few short stories, and the way that they're connected is awesome. And the way that it ends is like, no, no, no. But then at the end, like maybe he's going to have communicated it just enough through the drawing that they'll be able to solve the murder. It was awesome. I don't want to give any spoilers away. Really short, really easy read. I totally recommend Strange Pictures. I'd give this one an A. Really interesting book. Really cool how they managed to integrate the drawings into the stories without it feeling like a huge gimmick. Which at the beginning, in the first short story, I was genuinely concerned, but it gets better and better as you go. I'm going to talk about, he's like an online persona who like wears a mask, Uketsu or whatever. So he doesn't have like a full, it's like an internet name. He's kind of like a creepypasta guy, it kind of seems. This is another one from him. I love the covers, by the way. But this one was Strange Houses. This one I did not like as much. I felt like it had a lot of potential. You know, you do analyze the blueprint and you do realize, oh, something is wrong with this house. And it like builds up all this like suspense and tension, and you're like, oh, you know, this is gonna be crazy. Oh, that's awful. I wonder what could be happening. It just sucks because like the reveal, spoilers, is basically that the problem came from like them being like a kind of dynastic family, and then like I think like siblings or cousins like fall in love. So like the big reveal that like what's being hid is like, oh, it's incest. And that was just like for me that was disappointing. I thought that was going to be like kind of like the Strange Pictures where like there's like something weird, like they're killing people, like, oh no, like, but it was not. Yeah, and also I thought the motive would be like crazy like it was in Strange Pictures, but for this one it was just like, yeah, like they're trying to hide incest. It just sucked. I was like, meh. And it's also a short one. It's a really short one. You can read it if you want to, but again, when a short book is boring, that's a really, really bad sign. So Strange Houses is getting a D from me. We'll talk about Mina's Matchbox. This one was by Yoko Ogawa. A big part of what carried the story for me was just the way she writes. I love the way Yoko Ogawa writes, and the way they translate must just be nice. The story sounds like it would be crazy. There's kind of a girl who goes to live with her rich relatives because they have like a health drinks kind of soda pop empire. They at one point had a zoo, but because of I think the war or some sort of depression, all of the animals died or were killed except for a hippopotamus. So the hippopotamus has become like the family's pet. And so the girls ride the hippopotamus to school and like the town because they're like the rich family. Everyone knows them. And one of the girls is kind of, she's sickly. So people are always like keeping her inside, but she's also kind of a pyromaniac. Like that's why it's called Mina's Matchbox, is because she like carries a matchbox and she's like insane, like obsessed with like looking at the fire. Kind of funny, makes me think of that like meme where like the lady's like, oh my god, like we lost the house, everything's burned down, everything's gone, and then it like pans to the guy who's like, yeah man, like my lighters, my matches, they're all gone, this is awesome, the fire's huge. But yeah, there is eventually a fire, and it kind of like changes the town, and shows how the family has their place in the town, and a lot of it is just about the girl, her growing up, kind of figuring out who she wants to be. It feels like a coming of age book, kind of like prepubescent girl fiction that might be like really relatable for someone like that. But I am not a woman, and I've never been a prepubescent girl, which a lot of the book was, oh, it's like a nice story, but it was not relatable to me. So Mina's Matchbox, I think I'll put it in C. It wasn't really boring, but it definitely doesn't sound like the description of the story, like a pyromaniac, sickly girl, whose family owns a soda empire, and she like rides a hippopotamus to school. It sounds like it's gonna be a zany, kind of crazy book. Really sounded. It's like mostly like a coming of age, like growing up story, which is like kind of a slightly quirky backdrop. Um, Next, we'll do Agatha Christie, Murder on the Orient Express. Um, can't remember the detective's name. He's like a Belgian detective, I think. He has like a French name or something. Or maybe he's French. I think he was Belgian because he like has a French name and he speaks French, but I think he's Belgium. Um, interesting story. Kind of fun how the mystery, who done it, talking to the people on the train. It does kind of feel like it kind of wasted my time with the reveal. The reveal feels kind of like kind of stupid, if I'm being honest. And spoilers, it's a old ass book, so like if you haven't heard of this one or seen, they've made like a million movies, I feel like, of this one. Everyone loves the train mystery. But I don't know. The ending was kind of like basically, spoilers. The detective figures out that the person who was murdered on the train is someone who got away with murdering this girl who was like very beloved by a community. And so the detective does figure out that like basically everyone on the train killed the person. Everybody was in on it. And basically like the detective is like, yeah, he killed that sweet girl. Fuck him. Let's say this never happened. And so the police come and they're just like, bro, I don't know what happened. Maybe it was someone who got off the train here. So I don't know. The interviews and him like piecing things together and each of the reveals, oh, maybe it was her, oh, maybe it was him, oh, maybe it was him. Very interesting, very fun. But then the ending just kind of felt like a cop out. Like I feel like that's part of the fun with these kind of mysteries where it's like limited groups of people, kind of like a clue. You're like, oh, who done it? If the reveal is like literally everybody did it, I feel like it's just kind of not as satisfying. So this one I'm gonna have to give it a C, cause like the way it was written, pretty good, but like not that mind blowing. Some of the conversations were interesting, but like a lot of them were not. They were not. So, but I'm glad I read it. It's kind of a classic. Eventually, I need to read the one that has like the horrible original title, and then there was one, and then experience that one because I've read it. In fact, we'll talk about that one next. The Decagon House Murders. Shoot, it's too small. I can't. It's like Yukiko Katsuri or something. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. This one is kind of like referential of, and then there was one. This one I'm gonna give a C to, the Decagon House Murders. Basically, in this one, there's like a weird architect who built a Decagon house on a tiny island. And there's also like a mystery book club who decide they're all going to go to this little island to try and think about their first. I don't know. I can't remember what maybe it was like write a novel or do something for the end of school year store or festival or something. But they all start to die one by one, and whoever's killing them is leaving clues. They kind of give away the mystery at the beginning, like right before it starts. They kind of like inform you. So like as it's happening, all of them kind of think it's one of them, but you can kind of tell that it's not. Spoilers. Basically, there's someone who was associated, I think, with kind of tangentially the mystery club. I think it was like their younger sister I don't know. I can't remember if she got in a car accident or gets alcohol poisoning, but basically they were at like a class party. Maybe she fell down the stairs or something. Um, but she dies. I think it was alcohol poisoning because I remember when I was reading the book, like the guy who's killing them, it almost feels like the book wants you to be like, yeah, all these kids in this club deserved it. But I can't remember if it's just because like maybe they didn't call the police or take her to I can't to the hospital. But I remember when I read it, maybe I just read it wrong because I don't know if it's the translation of the way it's written. Some parts felt pretty clunky, but like I almost felt like thinking like it's not exactly their fault. And so I was like, it feels like the books wants you to feel that like all these school kids getting killed is like justified, but I didn't feel that way at all. Um, I felt bad for a lot of just like the kids, and that the resolution was kind of meh at the end. So this one, it was written all right, kind of interesting idea, but it was also kind of confusing and weird because like all of the part of them for the mystery club is they all like name themselves after like famous mystery authors, which starts to get confusing with who's who because they start using like Japanese names again too. So I also didn't feel super connected to the characters. So yeah, I didn't feel like the Decagon House was like very effectively written. Wasn't a huge fan. We'll do The Haunting of Tram Car. I think it's 15. Um, it's by like Jelly Clark or something like that. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong. This one is also gonna be a C for me. It's kind of weird. Um, there's a story, but I mean, sometimes it definitely feels like sometimes the theme is expressed through a story. And the theme could be like nationalistic or it could be woke, but like when there is a strong narrative, either way, I might say I disagree with the theme, but at least I can say, oh, I don't feel like I'm being preached to. Like it doesn't feel as heavy-handed. Like I feel like I was experiencing a story. Maybe I don't agree with the themes, but at least I got my money's worth, my time's worth because there was a story. This one definitely feels like it's maybe leaning a little bit too hard into like trying to push certain themes and like not giving enough attention to its own story. There's some strange emphasis on things. I mean, the idea on the world is kind of interesting. Basically, it is. Where does it take place? Um, let's see. I don't. I think it's Egypt. Yeah, it's Egypt. Because I think it's in like. It might be in Cairo. I think it's Egypt, but basically, it's an imagining where I think they use magic to repel the colony, the colonialization. I think it was British colonialization of Egypt, and because of that, um, like Egypt is much more technologically advanced and progressive. Which, no offense, but I feel like kind of theocratic kingdoms I don't feel are necessarily very progressive or um, they're not big on women's rights, I've noticed. um, so yeah, this imagining where like, oh, they repealed them, so like I think it would be like I imagine it would be like a Muslim kingdom at that point. I could be wrong. I don't know exactly what religion would be the dominant one, but in their imagining, basically, because of this, there's much more equality, um, and things are just better, and it's set deep in the past. I think, according to this book, women are like protesting for suffrage, and they're gonna get suffrage like way earlier than other people. Like they're gonna get the right to vote, which is a nice thought, but um, I think women did get the right to vote. Yes, after the colonizers of Egypt were kicked out. But I think women's suffrage was achieved. It wasn't achieved that much later than America and the UK, I don't think. In fact, it might have been, I can't remember which one was first, America or the UK. It might have been in between them. But it was like despite the kingdom. And it was like hard fought for, from what I understand. Like it wasn't easy to get women's suffrage. So it's kind of it's a weird thing to want to change and reinvent, and it feels like it's weird because it's like a big important backdrop of the story. Like it's part of why the trains are blocked and why they're having a hard time getting places, and why the bad guy runs into a crowd at the protest and why they're having a hard time getting him. So the protests of women's suffrage and them getting the right to vote is like placed as a big backdrop of the story, but I'm not sure why they felt the need to reimagine or invent it so much. And exactly, this is like a big conversation of the book, and like characters like sexual identity or religion is like talked about a lot in the book, but I feel like it's not that important to the story that's happening, which is about like two government officials like marshals or whatever who I guess ghosts exist in this world, and a ghost has like a spirit has like taken over a tram car, and they're assigned with removing this ghost, and they go to get help from like a jinn, and it's cool. But like a lot of the conversations and a lot of like the description and setting of the book doesn't feel like it feeds or helps the story. So I felt like it was a lot. It wasn't a big book, but I felt like there was a lot that I didn't need to read. I just wish, because the concept and like a different mythology, like jinn and like a more Egypt flavored story, I think would be so cool. But the story itself felt very lean and like not much happens. The tram car is haunted. They check it out. They're forced to receive the assignment. They talk to the jinn to get help. They make like a deal. They have this conflict with the spirit. And I think the nefarious person runs into the crowd, and they get him, and the fact that the women get the right to vote is announced. And they're back at the station talking about, the denouement, the things that happen at the end. But felt like not much happened, and there wasn't much story for how much book there was. So this one, it's might even drop it down to a C, but to a D. But it's just the mythology, and I mean, I want more stories that have different mythologies and different flavor, like having a kind of sci-fi mythical story in Egypt. That's awesome. Having like maybe I think it's Muslim or like Arab coded books, like that's cool, but I just wish there was more story in my story, because it just felt like too lean for how much I read. That's Tramcar, Haunting of Tramcar 15. We'll do another Kazuo Ishiguro. We'll do The Unconsoled. This one was a bizarre book. Like this, and it's a big book. It's a chonker. This is, I think, one of Kazuo Ishiguro's biggest books. In this one, there's a guy who is, I guess he's a successful pianist, and he's supposed to do kind of a concert or an exhibition in this kind of town. And he's very he's like always like, oh, I'm so excited for my parents to see this. My parents have got to see this. Like, oh, are my parents gonna come? People are like, oh, sure, yeah, we'll have it ready for your parents. Spoilers ahead. But basically everyone in the town like wants his attention. They want to like dump their problems on him, their relationship problems, drinking problems. There's a lot of funny moments, like there's someone they don't want to speak at the at like a big dinner they have to talk about the exhibition, and a lot of important people from the town are there, and so they're like, if that guy talks, they tell the pianist, they're like, you're a stranger and everyone's going to listen to you. We want you to interrupt him. So the guy is talking too much. They give him the signal, so they want him to interrupt the speaker. So the pianist stands like too fast, and like he catches all of his buttons on the table as he stands up fast. So he just like rips open his shirt, and so everyone is like mortified, but no one wants to say anything. There's a lot of like funny moments where like they kind of like it's like he's taking jabs at propriety, which kind of makes me feel like this book, like the actual theme is like two themes. I feel like one is just about how maybe sometimes we overthink relationships, or like relationships are just hard and sometimes they're like miserable or they suck. Um, like it's really weird. They introduce this woman and a boy as strangers, and then halfway through the book, he's referring to them as his wife and child. And even I watched interviews because I was like, this is confusing. He even acknowledges that. He's like, yeah, it's a very kind of surrealist book. Um, and the boy like really wanting to get this car, but they never quite get the car or the toy that he has. It's very strange. And the guy's parents, they never show up, and they never told him they were going to show up. They never told anyone they were going to show up. The guy was just, I guess, like very set on them seeing his success. It was weird. It made me think about maybe like some of the insecurity, especially like children have with parents, immigrant parents, maybe Asian parents. I don't know. But the primary theme for me was just the contrast between like propriety and like kind of prudish, stuck up, snobbish culture, and like living kind of rancorously in like the gypsy culture, like kind of British versus gypsy culture, because there's all this stress and like misery in these people's relationships, talking about someone being an alcoholic, someone, not having enough money, someone not being successful enough, not playing the piano well enough, or your kid not being talented enough. But then when the boy, the grandpa on the mom's side is a gypsy, and at one point, it's like the other time when music is really performed in the book. They like play this like really joyous kind of crazy like violin music that's like really energetic, and like the kid's grandpa, it's kind of funny, he just basically like is powerlifting a bunch of like shit that people bring him, so they try and like bring him like heavier and heavier stuff, so he's like a grandpa, but he's like lifting up like bags of like all of the dishware at the restaurant, and then eventually they like bring him the engine from a boat, and that's like the climax of it all. He's like lifting the engine of the boat, and everyone's like freaking out, and the son is like, oh my gosh, don't do it, grandpa, you're gonna kill yourself. And yeah, the grandpa does have to be like hospitalized after, but like the whole rest of the book is like this really like anxious, like super self-conscious, stressed out thing, aside from the ending and from this moment where like the grandpa is like lifting stuff and the gypsies are playing music and everyone's cheering and he's just like lifting heavy shit. So I felt like that maybe that was one of the themes of the book. And then at the end it's like kind of existential. He doesn't even play at the exhibition. He just like cries to like the museum director or something about, he like has a mental breakdown about his parents not being there. And everyone like goes to lunch and they're like more interested in the food. So like he never even plays at the exhibition. He never plays the piano in the town. And then I can't remember what he's like going to do. But like the wife is like, I can't do this. Like I'm taking the kid and leaving. And then the man just like gets on the bus and he's like, yo, whatever. He's like, he finds like, I think he like finds a breakfast sandwich and he's like talking about the breakfast sandwich with someone else, and he's like super only focused on that. Like it felt kind of made me think of like The Stranger, just kind of existential, where it's just the guy's just like, oh well, whatever happens, whatever. Because like you expect the character to be like, oh my gosh, my wife, my son, I didn't get to play it was weird book. I'm gonna put this one in a C. Oh, yeah, this one's C tier. Yeah, I don't know. It's just those themes were interesting, but it's a big book, and also I don't know if I really got it. It's just weird. There's a lot of weird things. I'm like, why did that happen? There were some moments that made me laugh, but there was also a lot of things where I was just like, okay, I'm losing track of what's happening because like he's changing the story without saying he's changing. Like when the I was so confused when all of a sudden it's like, why is that his wife and why is he hanging out with a wife and kid at the home? Like what is happening? Weird book. We'll do The Housekeeper and the Professor. Um, this one was kind of like Memento, but like wholesome Memento. Whereas Memento is like, oh my god, like humanity is awful. Oh, this is horrible. What a crazy twist. Oh my gosh, that's so dark. The Housekeeper and the Professor was like kind of a similar concept, but it was just like wholesome. It was like so sweet. I really enjoyed this book. Basically, the professor, um, he's like a super famous and intelligent mathematician, but he got in some sort of an accident or something. So he can only create short-term memory. So he can remember his past and his knowledge, but he like making new memories, he only has like 10 minutes or 2 minutes or something like that. Because of that, um, they have a hard time finding like a nanny for him, like like a maid to like help out around the house. So they end up finding this girl, and she's like a single mother with a son, and eventually the son meets the professor. But the professor loves connecting to people through numbers, and he really loves. I think he did a lot of studies with like prime numbers, and then there's like some numbers that are like ultra prime numbers. I can't remember. There's like some special math tricks or some numbers that are like especially unique, and I guess like the woman's birthday has one of these special numbers. And so he starts to kind of teach her a little bit about math. He helps her son with like math homework. Her son loves a baseball team that the professor loves, but the problem is, the professor had the accident a long time ago. So like the professor, in his mind, I think it's the Lions or something like that. His baseball team is like completely different players. And when the man is like forced to come to terms with like misremembering things, like it really stresses him out. And so they try and like not let him know that things have changed sometimes. So then they take him to the baseball game. He's like, oh no, like where are my favorite players and stuff? And so they're like trying to distract him. So like he doesn't pay too much attention to that and can just like enjoy the baseball game. But their relationship is really sweet. It was a beautiful story. The stuff about math was interesting and fun, and like it was cool the way that, I mean, they explained it, and which I feel like is impressive. That's one of the things where I'm like, wow, you go, Yoko Ogawa, because trying to make math entertaining, in my opinion, not an easy feat. So this one I would give an S. He's not tattooing himself like a Memento. He's like covered, and his house is like covered in post-it notes, which is cool because like in Memento, the theme is kind of like about consciousness and perspective, and like lying to yourself if you can't handle reality and like the darkness of that. And in this one, the post-it notes I feel like are more one of those things that I think are an expression of love, because like he wants to create a relationship with the woman and her son, and a huge part of relationship is just memory. And for a lot of us, we're lucky, we can just naturally make memory, but for him, he has to make a physical effort to keep them in his life. And it's also kind of like some of the conflict is like, because he depends on these post-it notes, someone can come in and try and destroy the relationship by removing you from his memory, his life. But yeah, it was a very, very interesting, entertaining, and moving story. So I'm giving The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa an S ranking. It was a great book. I would recommend it. Let's talk about Another Kazuo Ishiguro will do When We Were Orphans. This is Kazuo Ishiguro doing kind of a detective story. He seems to like, I think it's Shanghai or Singapore. I think it's Shanghai, which makes sense because it's like a very diverse, interesting place that had conflicts. Um, so in this one, it's about a boy who wants to become a detective, and everyone's like, good luck, dude, you can't do it, because he kind of is exposed to high society, but he's not of, the same stock that everyone else is. But he solves some mysteries. He starts to have some success. I don't know exactly what all of the theme in this one is. I think there's some stuff to do about Shanghai and war, but I think there's also some stuff to do with maybe obsession with success or your craft. Because him going into the war zone, him trying to see an old friend, and he projects that it is his old friend, but it's probably not actually his old friend. I think maybe some of Kazuo Ishiguro's own stuff in his own life with being Japanese but not being Japanese, because he did learn the language and his parents did give him books and stuff, but guess kind of like me with having a preconceived notion of something and then experiencing the real thing. How the boy met the Japanese boy who had their Japanese room. I don't know. This one, I don't feel like I got it enough. I feel like there's some interesting stuff with cognitive dissonance, like when he finds the injured man and he's like, oh, you're my friend, just because he is Japanese. Very interesting themes, but the book itself, I would have liked to just have a nice detective story from Kazuo Ishiguro, but I feel like it got a little too zoinky, spadoinky, zany at the end for me to really follow very well. But still, the way he writes, I enjoy it well enough that I wouldn't give it lower than a C, I don't think. We'll do Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sikugawa. This is one of the ones that I probably need to watch the movie for, because it was kind of developed into a movie. In this one, there's a guy who needs to hire an assistant, and he's dissatisfied with his life making sweet bean paste pastries in a stand, and eventually a older 70 plus year old woman comes who's got shaky hands, and he's like, dude, I don't want to hire you. But then she's like, no, try my bean paste, and it's super delicious, and it blows him away, and he's like, okay, I'll take you on. So she's working with him, and the stand becomes super popular because now the bean paste is great, and he starts to, through success, because I think he was just working at a crappy little stand. He had kind of lost his mojo. He starts to get it back, but then people find out who the old woman is who's helping him. Spoilers. It turns out I don't know if it was her too, or just her husband, but she came into direct contact with leprosy or something like that. Some sort of a disease that kind of disfigures you. But it wasn't directly contagious. But back then, when the epidemic happened, they didn't know that. So those people were isolated, and there's really bad public opinion of them. People were really scared, and so people start to talk bad, start not wanting to go to the bean stand. So she just leaves, and she tells him her history. I think that was kind of the interesting theme for me of this book, was just, disease is scary, so can you really blame the people? But how sometimes our bias can unnecessarily ruin people's lives or hurt people who don't deserve it. Towards the end of the book, it gets a little spiritual and weird. She kind of I think she, spoilers, she passes away. And he's kind of going through a funk again, but he I think sees her in a dream, and kind of speaks with her and sees her past, and kind of finds the secret of what makes the her bean paste the most delicious, and he finds like the secret to the recipe, and so he can like find success again. Um, some of those themes about, you know, illness and discrimination, kind of interesting. Gonna put this one in C though. I didn't really feel super huge on the ending, and sometimes the story was a little bit too saccharine for me, or it just like felt a little too gushy, um, a little bit too much for me. So this one's gonna be in C. We'll do All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. Kind of a cool western about almost the death of the American West, and how this guy kind of finds some of that in Mexico. Basically, he's like a horse whisperer. Um, I think it's his father or something, has an old ranch or something, but he's getting old or sick. And so the guy goes with a friend, and they go down to Mexico, um, meet some interesting people, have some crazy adventures. There's some romance, some love. Um, the family doesn't want that though, so he gets thrown in jail. There's like a spoiler. There's some assassination attempts on his life. He fights it off. It's kind of a coming of age story, but also feels like kind of an epitaph to the American West and just like cowboys, and you know how there's kind of some magic in horses, and the fact that, you know, we had a relationship with the thing that gave us transportation and kind of made the world work, and how now, you know, that attachment is kind of going away, and kind of a loss of innocence, loss of magic in exchange for practicality, which I feel like is paralleled, because basically, right before he eventually goes back to America. He talks to the aunt, or like the great aunt or something, of this woman who currently controls the fortune, the woman who he's in love with, and she's basically like, you need to leave, you need to fuck off. Like, I know obviously my niece or granddaughter or whatever she is to her is hot, but like, she's out of your league, and she'd probably fall out of love with you anyway. Like, you need to be realistic, you need to be practical. I'm not gonna let her be with you. Just I feel like, yeah, just the loss of magic in exchange for practicality, in my opinion, kind of felt like the theme of this book. It was entertaining. Didn't feel I didn't feel as connected to it, but I again, Cormac McCarthy, probably a horrible person, but I do love the way he writes. I do enjoy his writing style. So All the Pretty Horses. Maybe B, maybe C. I'll put it in C for now, just because it didn't resonate with me all that much. But the writing, it's enjoyable. It's one I could even recommend. We'll talk about South of the Border, West of the Sun. This, I think, might be the Murakami book that I like the most. May not be the hugest compliment, because most Murakami books I've read, I'm like, man, dog water. But this one, I kind of like it. I kind of liked it. I liked the theme, and I like the way the title kind of ties into it. The book basically is about like two phenomena. South of the Border is basically about achieving a mystery and being disappointed by the resolution. So basically, he hears this song, and he doesn't really understand English super well. He's listening to the jazz record, and he loves the jazz record. And there's a line in the song that's always, you know, south of the border. And he's kind of thinking that, like, oh my gosh, like, what is south of the border? It sounds like this magical, like, mysterious thing. Like, what does he mean by south of the border? And then he said, as he became an adult and he like learned more about English, he just realized that south of the border just meant in Mexico. And and it kind of it took some of the mustard and enjoyment he had out of the song and some of the magic out, because that grand mystery wasn't there anymore. It was just this very pragmatic kind of, it's just Mexico. He's singing about Mexico. He's not singing about any magical or mysterious place. And just that phenomenon. And then the opposite phenomenon is west of the sun, which it kind of describes as like this phenomena where people who live, I think especially in the north, and like Inuit people sometimes kind of have sun craziness, where, the land is so flat, they don't engage with people enough, and there's like no sound, that like the mind goes, it just breaks, and they start walking towards the sun. Kind of like, the penguin who's walking towards the mountain. Like, we don't know why he does it. If we stopped him, he would just continue to go to the mountain. Kind of like that. And it basically means, for a lot of them, certain death. And he kind of talks about how, it means death. It's dangerous, but like, maybe, like, it must be delicious to have something that you cannot reach, like the sun that you follow and you chase. Maybe there's something nice about having something that you're so driven towards that is unobtainable. And kind of these two ideas are kind of paralleled with the man's life. There's this woman that he's kind of obsessed with, and to the point that it's kind of like detracting from like his almost perfect life. Like, he has insane luck where he meets an amazing woman. They have a great family. Her father helps him become extremely successful. They have a lot of money, good car, good house. Everything's good, but he's kind of bored by this achievement. And also the woman he's obsessed with, part of it is because she's like super mysterious and kind of unobtainable. And then the one night where they do by the circumstance end up alone is somewhat disappointing in a way. I don't know, the way the story played with the theme and the title I thought was very interesting. So I feel like this would be a Murakami. You're probably thinking like, B, that's not that good. I enjoyed it well enough there, but there's a lot that it was very suburban. It was a very suburban story, so it didn't wow me. But in terms of Murakami, this is one where I can go, I could maybe recommend this. I could maybe call this a good book. With a lot of Murakami stuff, I'm just like, dude, you are... Like, the underage stuff and a lot of the stuff he does about women is just too gross for me to ever really respect. Next up, let's do The Tombs of Adawan. Ursula K. Le Guin. If you're a fantasy person and you have never read Ursula K. Le Guin, go and do it. I think Earthsea is the first book in the series, which her magic system and just the story she tells and her writing style, awesome stuff. This one definitely felt like a side story where kind of the main character of the book comes in halfway. I kind of wonder if the girl is going to play more of an important role. This one I would probably give a B to, just because it felt like a side story. Like, it felt like filler, unless maybe the girl is going to play a bigger portion later on. It did give a little bit more about the characters involved. Basically, there's a girl who's taken from her family because she's like chosen for whatever reason, and she like guards these tombs, and she didn't want to be there. And the main character of the last book eventually helps her, spoiler, gets out and escape. And it's just kind of interesting how she's being raised and devoted to this tomb that's underground, and everyone's like, you don't have a choice. Like, you're one of the chosen ones, and this is gonna be your role. And it's a very spiritual tomb. And then he comes from outside, and he's just like, yeah, you don't have to do that. We could just get out of here. An interesting adventure, and the way she creates cultures in her books is awesome. Ursula K. Le Guin is a great writer, in my opinion. I also read the next book in the series, which I think was kind of a send-off for the main character of the first book, which is what I thought maybe the second book would be. This one I'm going to give an A. There was some moments that I didn't feel like were as strong as the first book. Yeah, her first book is one that I would give an S to. Tales of Earth Sea, I think is what it's called, or something like that. Awesome, awesome book. The Farthest Shore is kind of his send off, and there's some awesome aspects of like this fading magic, or like a person who is too attached to immortality. They're obsessed with immortality, and so they are ruining the world for this obsession. I thought that was pretty cool, and I just love the way she writes. I love the way Le Guin writes. She does great fantasy. If you enjoy fantasy, you've enjoyed some of Tolkien or Lewis. I'm trying to think of other fantasy that's been popular now. She doesn't do really like what I actually kind of appreciate with her is she doesn't do like super like romanticy, like super sexual stuff. It just feels like, good fantasy where, maybe that's not necessarily the focus. I enjoy her work. Next up, we'll talk about Stormbringer. This was kind of like the collection of some of the Elrica Manibene stories bound up into one volume. I'm not sure if there's another one after this. It kind of felt, but that because it kind of came through like kind of shorter, like little bite-sized pieces. It was kind of like a serialized, I think, thing. I really love the world he creates and the start of the story. It's been turned into comic books, and a lot of what happens later and later as the story progresses definitely feels pulpy, kind of repetitive, kind of comic bookishy. It definitely feels like kind of like a earlier dark fantasy kind of thing, which isn't bad. Isn't bad at all. But I think I'd have to give this one maybe a C. I enjoyed it enough for what it was, but I don't know. Yeah, it's just there's definitely certain aspects that are dated or just too repetitive or uninteresting for me, or maybe just too cartoonish. But if you love fantasy and you love like sword and sorcery, give Elrica Malnemone a try. And it is important in the history of like fiction and inspiring other authors and things. Let's talk about Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This one it's pretty interesting fiction. I wonder if a lot of countries do this, but I feel like Japan really loves like time fiction. I feel like I've seen and watched and read several time fiction things from Japan. I think they really like it. And in this one, you can go back. It's weird because like you can go back in time to a time that you desire, which is very unlimited. Usually a lot of the dynamic and what makes different stories special about these kind of time travel or time loop stories is the limitations. And usually they really limit, it's one day, or it's 10 minutes, or it has to be 2 minutes. It's attached to a television. It's attached to some, in this one, the limitation does not come from where they can go. They can go anywhere that they can imagine. The limitation comes from how long you can be there and how you get there. Basically, there's one magic chair in the cafe that lets you time travel, but there's a ghost that inhabits it, and she only goes to the bathroom every so often. When she goes to the bathroom, that's when you can go there, and you have to get out before she comes back from the bathroom. And the way that they gauge that, and also you maybe getting stuck in time, is they pour you a cup of coffee, and that's where the title comes from. You have to come back before the coffee gets cold. Their huge limitation, though, is that you can't change anything. You can't change anything about the past, and everything you do in the past is not going to change anything about the future. So if someone dies and you go back in time and you're like, hey, you're going to get in a car accident, they're still going to die in a car accident, or maybe they'll die, instantly in a different way right after. So you cannot change the present by going and interacting with the past. And so like a lot of the people's interactions are kind of anticlimactic, kind of unsatisfying, because they can't really do much, which is interesting to see. But there are a couple where they kind of like glean things, or they it changes their perspective. Spoiler: there's one woman who has like her husband is becoming he's dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's, so he's like forgetting her. And her going back in time and kind of talking to him, I think a little bit about, she doesn't want to like stress him out, but she talks a little bit about enough that she comes to realization through their conversation that even if he doesn't know what she is and doesn't remember her as her wife, she knows who he is, and she's going to treat him as her husband even if he keeps forgetting. And so it's kind of interesting how basically the effect of them time traveling, because in a lot of time traveling, it's like you figure out how to make the present or the future correct by changing things and changing yourself. But a lot of this, for these people, it's just like maybe getting a little bit of resolution or getting a perspective change is what helps them. There were a couple, it follows a few different people who come in and visit. It's not a long book. A couple of them were not that interesting or moving to me, but a couple of them were moving to me, and I felt like did use the system in a nice way. So I'll give this one a B before the coffee gets cold. That one gets a B for me. We've only got a handful of books left. We're getting towards the end. We are going to talk about A Midsummer's Equation by Keigo Higashino. I think I read a few of his Galileos back to back to back. I think A Midsummer's Equation is the one where he goes to like a hotel in kind of like a resort town, and I think it's the one. Let me just double check. Midsummer's Equation. Because I don't want to like mix up the titles of like his Galileo books. Yes. So it's like a seaside town. He goes to like a dying seaside town. There's like a hotel, and there's like a painting that is important to the story. And there's a boy who's like related to the owners of the hotel. And he's like depressed because he has to do like math and science homework. But the physics professor like shows the boy how science is actually like really important to regular life and how interesting it can be. Like they do stuff with fireworks and stuff. And fishing. And at the same time, I think there's like arguments in the seaside town about mining rights or oil refinery, some sort of material rights that would maybe kind of destroy the town, which they're kind of like tempted to sell out because there were like closer towns that offered similar things. And so the town's kind of tourist industry is kind of dying. But the lake or the sea by the town is like extra special, I think, because of it was either the material or there's like a bioluminescent animal or something that makes it extra special. And so the professor also doesn't want the town to be exploited for its resources. This one, the mystery was like, all right. My favorite thing about this one, I'm going to give this one a B, because I really loved I love when they use the professor effectively, and I feel like they did here, because he's really helping this boy with his homework and their conversations where he helps the boy understand that science can be fun and kind of cool, which, you know, things like Bill Nye and stuff like that. It's like, I mean, science is like the magic of reality. So it sucks when you have someone who maybe made you feel like science was boring or like too above you. And so like the professor like connecting with this boy over that was an awesome aspect of the story. And so I really like this one. Next up, let's talk about The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. This one, a lot of the story didn't really hit home with me. Again, spoilers. This one is about a butler who is a son of a butler, and he works for this distinguished man who he really respects, and he takes his job extremely seriously. He's very devoted to his craft as being a butler, like a traditional British butler. But here's the thing. It turns out the man that he spent his life serving, and he sacrificed his own... He didn't sacrifice his life like dying, but he sacrificed his life in maybe even a more depressing way, where he didn't develop his own opinions or chase his own pursuits. He devoted himself entirely to just trying to be this man's best butler. Turns out that man might be a Nazi sympathizer and even helper during the war. And basically, this is another book where I feel like the kind of disparate stories works really well, because it's bouncing back and forward between the man, like currently he's on a road trip because he received a letter from a woman that kind of, he interprets the letter basically that the woman misses him because they were friends when he was a butler and she was like the head maid. But she ended up leaving to go do her own thing. And he thinks, oh, like, I think she eventually got married. And so he was thinking, oh, you know, things must not have worked out with her husband. Like, maybe she misses me. Like, I'm a pull through. But it turns out he completely misinterpreted the letter. She's pretty happy with her life. He's the one who has just wasted his life. And on the road trip, he kind of gets out for the first time and he has conversations, he meets people, and I love the interaction he has with the people he meets when he breaks down, and I love road trips. And yeah, I love those themes of cognitive dissonance, just kind of like realizing, like, how do you cope when you're like, oh, this thing I devoted my life to, it's not what I thought it was. So I think this really communicates that super effectively. And it's like kind of bittersweet at the end, kind of dismal, but also maybe hopeful. But he did kind of, in a certain way, kind of waste a lot of his life, and he lost his chance with this woman. I'm going to give this one a B, just because a lot of like the conversation, what happens, is kind of like British high society stuff, which to me, that aspect is not interesting. Like you and your tea parties and like your correct decorum. Like, dude, I don't care. Yeah, but love the way he writes. Now let's talk about The Long Walk by Stephen King. Very interesting concept. I need to watch the movie. Ending is kind of brutal, but it is a very brutal story. I've heard some people say they think it's allegorical for like the draft, and like just being like, oh well, we're basically like culling the young men, just like sending them to die. This one makes me think of like, I think it would be Colorado, but like I was like driving through native land to get to, I'll have to look up what it was, like a small town, but I was on like these really like empty middle of nowhere roads, which was awesome to read this book during that. But like I love the descriptions of their progress through like the states and like Maine, and just the way, I mean, you would think that it would be like kind of hard to create so much suspense and action with the concept where it's like there's 100 boys who've basically been selected, and they're kind of vague about it. They're like, if you win, you get your wish, and everything will be taken care of you, and you're gonna have a great life, supposedly. But basically, you have to walk at a certain speed, and you cannot drop below that speed for a certain amount of seconds, or they shoot you. So, and everyone just kind of like can't handle it slowly, and then they're falling off. People are trying to sabotage or help each other. There's a lot of interesting things about this book. The ending is brutal, And it is one of those ones that kind of makes me feel like, well, what was the point of all that? But it was a bit of a wild ride, so I can't hate on it too much. Um, this one would probably be B or C. Another interesting aspect, I think this might have been one of the books where Stephen King originally published it under an alias, but I could be wrong. I know he did some of his books under like an alias for a while. B or C. Let's not be a hater. I'll say B. Silent Parade. 1 second. With these Keigo Higashinos, like I remember the stories, but sometimes I mix up the titles. Let me see. A Silent Parade. Keigo Higashino. Which one was that? Oh, yeah. I think I remember being okay with this one. Yeah, I think this one I'm also gonna have to. Definitely not as bad as these ones. I'm gonna put it as C, A Silent Parade, just because this is one of those ones where I really loved. I mean, I enjoyed his the way he was used in the relationship with the boy, in Midsummer's Equation. I really enjoyed it. What got me hooked on Keigo Higashino's writing was Suspect X. This one was pretty cool how he used physics to solve the murder. Basically, there's like two, I think they were similar, two murders that happened apart, and one of them was during a festival. And like it's really confusing and mysterious because like there was a locked door. Some people are like thinking about like carbon monoxide poisoning and stuff like that. How he uses physics is cool, and in this one it does make sense. Um, him being a professor is helpful, and it does tie into the story. But this one again, really enjoyable, like a good mystery one, but it's not memorable. Like I literally had to look up the synopsis because I was like, God, which one was this? So because of that, it's just going and see. I could recommend it. Like if you're like, I've read every detective novel, I've read all the mysteries, I need more. Read all the Galileos. Read all the Galileo series by Keigo Higashino. It's enjoyable. It's good. Now we're going to talk about Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men. This, I feel like, is a really interesting book. I feel like I'm going to have to put it as B, which will probably piss some people off, but I'll explain why. Some of the stuff that I feel like the movie is a masterpiece. And in the movie there's less about like the underage stuff and like the girl, which I feel like is maybe kind of important to the book because it's part of why the guy is like truly defeated, truly ruined, because now the guy's wife thinks that he was having an affair. She always wonders if he was having an affair with the young girl, and a lot of people think that's why he was killed, and and not about like the mob's money or whatever. If you haven't ever seen the movie No Country for Old Men, that's an easy recommendation. Like definitely watch that, especially if you love the movie The Dark Knight. I mean, just Anton Chigurh, kind of being a combination of like the Joker and Harvey Dent. He's like a terrifying, fantastically written villain. And just that force of like violence or like destiny coming for you, even though, he's kind of powered and fueled by evil forces, is like an interesting aspect of the novel. I also feel like an interesting aspect of the novel is kind of the detective and his history, and his family's history, and just things not being quite what they seem, and kind of the kind of convoluted or murky history of America and people in general, that's just not clean cut. Those themes in the book are really interesting. And it's just an awesome adventure, like the progression and the cat and mouse chase. It's dismal. The ending is, oof. It leaves you going, dang. Because you do kind of root for the guy. You want him to get away with it. With the money that he finds between like a drug deal gone wrong. But yeah, Anton Chigurh is just this force of nature, this monster. There's a lot of other people who have done, like, I'm having a hard time, I'm just speaking off the top of my head. There's a lot of people who have done really cool analysis of the book and the movie, because it's got some fascinating themes. I think one of the big things that they changed from the movie, is the underage girl. I think it's just like a woman who kind of calls out to him at the pool, which it makes sense. I'm kind of glad they didn't include that framing, and I don't think it was necessary for the movie. So I think that's a good thing that they changed. The final book we're going to talk about, I think, is my favorite book that I read in 2025, Asako Yuzuki's Butter. This is one that I didn't think I would like as much as I did, but I really, really enjoyed it. In this book, basically, there's a woman I think she's kind of like a reporter. She's kind of unsatisfied with her life and where work is going in her relationship. And she gets this story, and she really wants to do the story. She becomes captivated by this woman who is maybe not, she's kind of described like Murakami's girls, a lot of Murakami's girls. She's heavier. She maybe doesn't have like a super attractive face, conventionally attractive face, but she keeps getting these really high profile, really rich men as relationships, and they keep dying mysteriously from like health related things or accidents. And so the woman has been arrested, and the girl wants to interview her and find out more about her. And she has these preconceived notions about the woman, like how are you ensnaring these men? Like, why are you doing this? And she learns more and more about this woman and this woman's past that shaped her. And a lot of it is kind of dark. I think a lot of the themes that they cover are important, especially for kind of that section of Asian culture, like Japan and Korea. It's just like the way that they perceive women and women's weights and stuff like that was very interesting. And the reporter actually starts to learn more and more from the woman, and starts to kind of live more and starts to enjoy things. She allows herself to gain weight. She puts butter in ramen. She tries to prioritize her sexuality a little bit more. I think my favorite theme from this book, the book definitely feels like it is written by a woman for women. And so some of the male characters are a lot more flat or didn't feel as relatable. But what I did love is there's kind of this theme that's addressed where they talk about how these men's death and failure is constantly put and blamed on the woman. So they're like, oh, because she was super seductive and wanted to spend all his money, or because she was feeding him all this like overindulgent food, or this guy did this because he was lonely, he needed a woman. Oh, this guy is depressed and like he's abusive, or he's like suicidal because the woman left him, or he's not getting female attention. And just like how frustrating it is that like people do that. Like they're like, oh yeah, a man needs a woman. And so both your success and failures are often attributed to having a woman or the woman you have or whatever. I was just like, yeah, you can't depend and you can't place all of that on your relationship, and it can't be expected to. And you've got to own up your own stuff. Like you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to take care of your mind. You've got to have your own goals and stuff. So that didn't feel like it was the primary theme. It felt like they were more doing it as a way to show how the I guess she would maybe be considered the antagonist, the woman who was arrested, who had all the rich husbands, how she is maybe misunderstood. But I think it's an important theme for men to know that, you probably cannot and should not just put all of your stock on a relationship, or put all of your purpose or value in the woman that you are chasing or have or whatever. But yeah, I really love the way it was written. There were a couple of parts where it kind of lost maybe a little bit of the momentum, or some themes where I was like the way her relationship, that guy is treated and how he's written kind of sucks in my opinion. But overall, I really enjoyed this book, and I thought it was like very interesting and a very interesting concept. So I think it's my favorite book I read in all of 2025. Thank you. This one was a lot longer than I thought it was. I thought this was only going to be an hour long. It took me like a few hours just yapping about all these books. If you ever watch this, hopefully I'll try and edit it down into just a regular YouTube video. But I felt like this would be a good way to just capture what I'm saying. Just do it live. Thank you to anyone who tuned in and watched. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. I don't think I'm going to be able to have time to drive today, so maybe I'll try and do a driving stream tomorrow. And tonight I'm going to a sim racing kind of arcade. There's this guy who's got kind of a startup, and they're doing a networking event where like real racers and drivers I think are going to be there. So they were like, yeah, you should pull through. So I'm actually going to go to that in Salt Lake City tonight. So yeah, I think I'm going to get ready for that. Thank you to anyone who tuned in again, and whoever watches this in the future. If you haven't read a book in a long time, maybe take one of my recommendations, or just, give it a go. Read again. Reading can be nice. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.